Well, good evening, members. Before I open the meeting, please can I ask any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback, please. Could I ask any remote participants to keep their microphones off unless they wish to speak? And please note the meeting is being recorded and staff may use body-worn cameras within the premises. Data captured during these recordings will be processed and retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy, and the meeting recording may be published on the Council's website. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use a Swillborough Council or Kent County Council laptop to participate virtually. If you join using a link on the website or on a mobile or tablet device, it is not possible to identify you and you will not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Members, could I ask you all to speak loudly and clearly into your microphones and to switch your microphone off after speaking, otherwise remote participants may be unable to hear the next speaker. Well, welcome everyone to this Policy and Resources Committee meeting, including any visiting members, attending remotely and members of the public. Could I now welcome our Chief Executive, Larissa Reid, Director of Resources, Lisa Fillery, our Head of Place, Joanne Johnson, Head of Kent Audit, Catherine Woodward, who is delayed in traffic at the moment, Head of Housing Communities, Charlotte Hudson, our Monitoring Officer, Robin Harris, Policy and Engagement Officer, Janet Dart, our Project and Transformation Manager, Sarah Porter, LGR Project Officer, Louise Galloway, and our Planning Manager Policy, Natalie Earle, Project Manager Policy, Stuart Watson, our Principal Planner, Gavin Ball, Principal Planning Officer for Policy, Onawali Kufaroji, and our Planning Policy Officer, Emma Gibson, our Principal Heritage Officer, Jamal Kishore, and Democratic Services Team member, Tim Neal. Thank you. Members, there is no fire drill planned, and if the alarm sounds, those in attendance should leave via the exits indicated and assemble outside where directed. Do not use the lifts. And please, can I ask now that if anyone in attendance will require any assistance in evacuation? Thank you, members. Could I now ask if there are any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Hunt this evening, who is being substituted by Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any declarations of interest this evening? Okay, thank you. Item 5, which is matters arising. There are no updates that I've got to inform you of on that one. So we move on to item 6, which is items for noting. The forward decisions plan. Is your wish that we note them? Thank you. The following items are for the committee to make a formal decision on. And I noticed one thing that I have skipped through, but it wasn't my listing, is the minutes of the previous meeting. Is it your wish that I sign them off as a true record? Thank you all very much indeed. Yeah, no, I've just finished mine earlier, Mike. Okay, we move on to item 7 then, which is the risk management update. I'm in Sarah's absence. I should invite you to Cathy.
Thanks, Chair. As we've explained, Catherine Woodward, the Head of Audit, has been delayed, I'm afraid. So I'm carrying this report tonight. So risk management at Swale Borough Council is facilitated by Mid-Kent Audit. One of the benefits of this approach is to provide independent oversight to the Council on the process. Policy and Resources Committee are responsible for oversight and challenge of how the Council's risks are managed. In 2025, the Council's risk management framework was comprehensively reviewed and updated. And following on from this, periodic review of the risk register is the next step of good governance for risk management. In February 2026, Catherine Woodward, the Head of Audit, engaged the support of the Howden Group. The Howden Group are risk management experts, and we asked them to work with us to facilitate a review of Swale Borough Council's strategic risk register. There were 3 main stages to this review. Firstly, to capture feedback through surveys to those members with risk management oversight responsibility. All members of Policy Resources and Audit Committee and group leaders were invited to take part in the survey so that we could capture as many insights as possible. The second stage was to hold individual interviews with senior officers, the leader of the council and the chair of the Audit Committee. The key themes from survey responses and these interviews were collated and presented at the third stage, a risk management workshop. As with all the surveys and interviews, the workshop itself was facilitated by Howdens and was open to all members of Policy and Resources, Audit Committee, group leaders, as well as SMT, who will ultimately have operational responsibility as risk owners. The workshop was very well attended and members contributed significantly to the process of refreshing and updating the risk register. Page 15 of your report gives the titles and descriptions of all of the risks now on the Strategic Risk Register, and pages 16 to 32 details the causes, impacts, current controls, future actions, and unmitigated and mitigated risk scores. This is the culmination of all the work of both officers and members to update the risk register. Future reports will return to the original style and format for risk reporting. As I say, Cathy Woodward unfortunately isn't able to attend tonight, but we're happy to take any questions now, and I can take any questions away with us if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Observations? Councillor Gibson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose a thank you is, again, a very thorough, very helpful report. Obviously, those of us on Audit Committee have seen a variety of these and this one, so very pleased to see it come here. And just to, I suppose, I'm going to share the fear of God that was put into me at the LGA conference last week. The risk register very accurately reflects the enormous impending danger of LGR and the work this council is doing to mitigate that risk. But it is terrifying and colossal. There are a huge number of very small, very banal tasks that all need to be sorted in roughly 20 months, with our officer capacity already broadly at full tilt. So full credit to them, and I think we need to. I know we are keeping an eye on it, but we need to keep a very close eye on that particular risk.
Thank you. Members, Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, all sorts of bases are covered through this report, but obviously one of the overriding issues that we continue to grapple with is the funding pressures that we face. And obviously, when we were given the 3-year funding settlement, we hoped that that would give us a degree of certainty to be able to plan, but as we can already see from events around the world, there's going to be further pressure because it's noted in here about inflation being higher than we'd expected it to be, and that's likely to continue given events that have happened today. Already oil prices are on the rise again, and that obviously means that interest rates won't be coming down in the way that we had all expected they would be, and the Bank of England had expected they would be, and all other expectations had been set around that. So that does continue to be one that, unfortunately, global events will continue to have an adverse effect for us. So we'll have to just keep a close eye on that, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting, please.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it's following a little bit from Councillor Wise, really, because it's all of this is money related, and a lot of the risk comes from not having enough resources, both in money and in staff and time, to do what we think we want to do. On page 21, we talk about failure to deliver the corporate strategy, and one of the things in there, one of the actions that it suggests is reviewing our corporate priorities and reviewing the annual delivery plans and all. But they're all the things that we just, in a way, just talked about in the briefing, and that all the committees are talking about in their budget briefings. I think this underlines that just those 2 lines on this page underline the importance of getting that budget work done, of committees coming forward with prioritising properly and seeing where the savings can be made to ensure that we can fund ourselves to deliver the things we really do need to fund, and the things we really do need to do. So I think it's just a message back to all the committees, including this one, to properly look at those funding priorities and those project priorities moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. To comment on the regulatory and legislative compliance score, how does LGR fit into that at all? Because I was a little bit surprised that even with the mitigated, it comes down to 3. Given that, if it is including there, as what we've just been talking about briefly, the impact of trying to do so many things that we already do and have to do so many more that we're going to have to do over the next year, 2 years, on top of that. And also, I mean, to a slightly lesser degree, the impact of, I'm going to pick on the planning changes, that we could end up having officers spending some time working up applications that we then have to, because we're minded to refuse it, then have to send to the Secretary of State for them to say yes or no, which is a cost of time and resource and pounds to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to comment at all, or Kathy? No? Okay. Councillor Worcester, please.
Thank you, Chair. On item 7, failure to deliver statutory services, it's good to see that the mitigating factors have taken that from a black to a yellow. So that's good. And I can see that's very similar for lots of that we've managed to put something in place to move from our initial assessment to what it is. I just would like to be reassured that when that comes to actually putting elements in process, that members can be reassured that if we are really looking at the risk of statutory service failure, there is plans in process to obviously involve members at the earliest possible time. Thinking back to when the bin contract changed over, I think it was identified that on a number of those elements, that if we'd have looked at how that plan was put in place for the extent of the issues that we received, we may have been able to put something a little bit quicker in place to be able to support that concern. So that's what my question is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again. Kathy, did you want to comment on it, or? Duly noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. I did ask a question on my one about the cost, like LGR, in terms of how the risk assessment got to that point. So I would like some form of an answer, please. So on,
Yeah, it was about the risks and the mitigation.
Yeah.
That would bring it down to a 3.
so on the regulatory and legislative compliance, does that include elements of LGR to get it down to? If it does, I'm surprised it's such a low score. If it doesn't, then I can understand it. Kinda.
So yes, it does. The surprise that it's such a low score, I think the fact that all of the work that we're doing across Kent, that score may change depending on what the geographies turn out to be. If the geographies turn out to be one where we're not disaggregating, then actually, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's much more simple. And then I think 3 is absolutely right. If it is 5A or 4D where we are disaggregating, this is a live document. We meet regularly with our LGR working group and we go through risk. I'm also the chair of the project management office group. We talk through risk as well. At the moment, with what we know, I'm comfortable that 3 is the right place. If we go to 4D, we don't know whether 4D will be as put forward by Medway Council, which splits us into 3, or on our response to the consultation, we said, if you're going with 4D, please split us into 2, do not split us into 3. Until we know the outcome of all of those things, we don't know whether that risk could change and that mitigation could change and that risk could go up. But if it's any of the ones where we stay as we are, i.e. we move en masse, so either 3.1 or 3 or 3A or 4B, then I'm comfortable that that risk is the right risk at this time. As I say, depending on what happens Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, will depend on whether that risk does change. But with what we know at the moment, I'm comfortable that that's the right risk.
Thank you. Sorry.
Just to add to that, as Larissa said, it is a live document. So as with all of these strategic risks, we will be working with the risk owners and keeping them updated. It's the risk owners' responsibility to make sure that they're regularly reviewing these risks, and Mid Kent Audit as facilitators will be sort of prompting to make sure that that happens as well. So just to reassure you all that they are kept under review. I can't stress that enough. As Larissa said, it is a live document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, members, could I have a proposer for the recommendation? Councillor Wise, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bowen. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we now move on to agenda item 9, which is the Swirl Community Governance Review. Final recommendations.
We're just bringing Sarah over to talk to her.
Sorry?
We're just bringing Sarah over to
Oh, right, okay. Just bear with us, members. We're having to do a little bit of shuffling this evening.
Chair, just for clarification, on the internet, it says the next item is number 8.
Yes, it does. I've got a hard copy here, which has got it as 9. So,
I think the published agenda is a bit out of sync.
yes, it is.
I think it's a different number on the
Right, members, we'll press ahead with this item. Thank you, Sarah, and then we'll resolve the outstanding issues afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So this report sets out the final recommendations from the Community Governance Review. It follows a 2-stage consultation where we had some very strong resident engagement. At stage 2, we received 1,692 responses, with over 1,200 of those coming from Sittingbourne, over 300 coming from Faversham, and over 100 coming from Sheppey. The aim of the Community Governance Review, for anyone that just needs the reminder, is to better make sure that local governance better reflects communities and supports effective delivery, particularly as we move into local government reorganisation. At a high level, we recommend a package of changes across the borough rather than isolated adjustments. So this is covering new councils, boundary changes and representations. These have been developed by the cross-party steering group following a detailed review of the consultation responses. As a very broad summary, I'll start with the creation of 5 new parish, town and community councils, which is one of the most significant elements. So the recommendations are the creation of a new halfway parish council with 7 seats, a new Merston Parish Council with 9 seats, a Kemsley Parish Council with 9 seats, a new Milton Regis Town Council with 9 seats, and a new Grove Park Community Council with 7 seats. Then further recommendations are around boundary changes across the borough, and this is to better reflect how communities actually function. So there's things include changing the name of Warden Parish Council to Warden Bay Parish Council. There's been several boundary adjustments between the new Halfway, Minster-on-Sea, Queenborough and Sheerness Town Councils, just to tidy up boundaries there. The transfer of Lucas Close from Sheerness to Queenborough. And there were also some proposed changes that were not taken forward where there was limited support. In Faversham, there were boundary extensions to Watling Ward to include areas such as Perry Court. There are additional transfers of land between Faversham, Bourton, Selling, Sheldwich and Graveney. There was an extension into Ospringe that was not taken forward, which reflected, again, consultation responses. And then Sittingbourne and surrounding areas, boundary changes included some adjustments involving Irwade and Bobbing, the extension of Bobbing Parish to include the Meads, and the extension of Tong Parish to include Great East Hall. So mostly these are just to tidy up boundaries and to kind of align them with existing communities and future development. And then finally, we had some changes to representation. So Watling Ward in Faversham, it was proposed that we increase from 4 to 6 councillors. Priory Ward, again, 2 to 3 councillors. And then Tong increasing from 5 to 7 councillors to reflect that their expanded boundaries. So it's also key here, I think, to highlight what we're not recommending. So we're not proposing a Sittingbourne Town Council, as the majority of respondents were not in favour. And then there were also some boundary changes that have been dropped where there wasn't sufficient local support. Essentially, it's a comprehensive and consultation evidence-based package of changes. So we really considered the community's input into this and these recommendations. I'm happy to hand over to Councillor Whiting as chair of the working group to close the item. If the chair says that.
I know you would.
Sorry. Thanks. Sorry,
I know you wouldn't object, Sarah, to me passing on to you, but thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah. As Chair, as Sarah said, this has been a very comprehensive review. And I just want to start by thanking Sarah, by thanking Louise, Steph and Larissa for the hours that they have put in, and the members of the working group. And we burnt the midnight oil at both ends of the candle sometimes, but we've got through an awful lot of work. And it was really important, I think, to get it right. What I was really pleased with were the responses that we got. And this is very much, as Sarah said, a response-driven agenda. The people who responded to the questions we asked have set the agenda for the working group, and therefore have set the tone and the framework within which we've made the group has made the recommendations that are set out tonight. Finally, I want to thank, of course, those residents, the towns and the parishes that did respond. There was a little bit of fatigue, it must be said, after, the law requires us to have 2 consultations, and I think the second consultation, in some areas where the responses dropped off slightly, and we kind of put that down to consultation fatigue. I think people think they'd answered a question once and didn't need to answer it again, and I can fully understand that. But overall, I thought the level of response compared to similar exercises in boroughs elsewhere was extraordinarily good. So thanks again to the comms team in particular in getting all that out. I'll end it there. I don't think there's more to be said. Sarah's covered the salient points. It is a comprehensive list of changes, but I think they're vital and important changes to be made before LGR kicks in and before we know where we're going with the new unitary tier of government that will sit above these town and parish areas. So I just want to, if I may, Chair, propose that we accept recommendations 1 to 23 as set out on pages 33 and 34 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. I too would like to extend my thanks to the staff involved in this, because this was a really comprehensive piece of work, involving a lot of going in one direction, then changing, responding to what we got back. And I'd like to thank Councillor Whiting for chairing the group so efficiently and keeping us all on spot. I'm happy to support recommendations 1 to 23. I just think that regarding the Sittingbourne Town Centre area, I know there was 318 to 256 in favour of keeping it unparished, but the overall vote across the borough was a clear indication that people wanted a lower tier of government, and our job was mainly to find out which lower tier of government best accommodated their desires. We've had to move a few people around who didn't necessarily want to be, but that's how it is. I just think that if we go ahead and leave Sittingbourne without a town council, in 2 or 3 years' time, people will be saying, why on earth haven't we got a parish council? Why haven't we got a town council? Why has everybody else got one? Why haven't we got our voice? When they see Swale go and there is nobody speaking for Sittingbourne, I think people are going to be saying, well, they should have just done it. We can just do it, and I think it's worth giving some consideration to that, because I think it is in the better interest of Sittingbourne that we do have this town council. And I know that we haven't got the voting figures to show it, but I think it would be in the greater interest. Let's not discuss Brexit.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did read this report, as I've read others in the past. When you're finished, it's better. Can I ask the officers if they consider the responses that they're basing the recommendations on to be statistically significant? Because from where I'm sitting, they're not. But then I could have missed something. If, forget we're just doing this for LGR, but in the past, if residents have wanted a community governance review, they have had to get 10% of the electorate, if my figures are correct, to sign a petition saying we would like a community governance review. So on the basis that 10% of the electorate, is statistically significant. And when I look through when I look through all of these, to be frank, there isn't even 10% on them. And that's why I'm asking whether it's statistically significant. When we agreed to go forward with this CGR, we said it was, we said, and I most certainly did say, I would not support something unless the majority of residents wanted it. Now, if 2 out of 10 residents want something and have bothered to write in, I don't think you set something up on behalf of the other 6,000, because I think that is totally wrong. There's this thing called the silent majority, and it so often happens in these cases. And I do recall the last time that Councillor Whiting wanted a parish council in Halfway, he got the council to do a postal ballot. And there was a quite significant response to said postal ballot of all of the electorate in the Halfway area. well over 50% said no, they didn't want it. So, yeah, I would like some answers to those questions, please.
Okay, thank you. Larissa?
So you're correct, Councillor Harrison. There are two routes to do a community governance review. One is a community governance review can be, I'm going to use the phrase demanded, because if you get, it's not just 10%, it depends. There are a number of factors. It depends on the size. And I've had this conversation with Councillor Whiting when he did the last one, where he did get the requisite number of votes. However, they weren't all electors. And so that's the first way. And irrespective of what's happening, we must do that if that is what's required. There is another route where the Swale Borough Council can agree to do one. They can agree to do one if nobody asks and they choose to do one. That is their choice. And this is how this one started. I think one must be very careful when looking at statistically significant. You're right, it's probably not 10% of the electorate, but what we have found is it is significantly higher than our neighbouring colleague councils who have done lots of postal ballots and other things. So I'm confident that everyone that had a view, positive or negative, responded. And I think to say that somebody, because they haven't said yes, if the question was, is it a yes, then that would be fine. But the question was also, is it a no? So in the same way that you could argue that people haven't said yes, don't want it, you could also argue that people haven't said no, do want it. So there is that. So what we do is we go on just the people who have commented, which is in community governance areas quite high. So the working group was comfortable, and members did an awful lot of work, as did our colleagues, officers, in going round delivering. We had colleagues standing in the Forum Shopping Centre. We had colleagues standing all over the place, actually. When I say colleagues, we had Louise standing here, there and everywhere. People think there's three of her in the borough because everywhere they turned up, there she was. But we've done a lot of work. So we are comfortable as officers in this process that everybody that did want to express a positive or a negative view had the opportunity to do so. The fact that we've got the numbers, that's the numbers that we have to work on.
Thank you. Councillor Wise, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I think that's a very helpful reminder from the Chief Executive there, because likewise, when it comes to elections, we give people the opportunity. There's no compulsion for them to express a view. We could have very disappointing turnouts in local elections. You could have those votes spread across 10 candidates where somebody then gets in with a very small number and we don't question their legitimacy. And I think that is how I would proceed with viewing the responses to this community governance review. And again, I would associate myself with earlier comments from members thanking officers for all the hard work that went into this, because it hasn't been an easy task doing so many areas through one review. Usually we're looking at far fewer numbers of areas to have these in one go, and there was all sorts of considerations that we had to take into account in order to do this and to get it turned around in the time that we have. That's not to say that there's a few things that I wish had obviously been slightly different. And obviously, if budget was no issue, we would have postal balloted everybody and all sorts. But that is not the position we're in. I do think one of my regrets is that when you look at the letters that were delivered to the Sittingbourne area, they were proportionately quite low compared to some of the other areas. And that is a regret, because I do think that there were people that missed out on their opportunity to have a say. It's a very low number, 700 delivered in Roman Ward. It's just, we needed to do more than that, really, to give people a fair opportunity to say something. But a decent number of people did still respond to the consultation when you look at other consultations this council runs, and they did express a clear preference regarding the Sittingbourne Town Council proposals. I personally think it's a huge missed opportunity for all sorts of reasons. We've had lots of lively discussions at the Sittingbourne Council and Residents Forum and at the recent Economy and Property Committee about Sittingbourne Town Centre and the wider area, and all of those things I think would benefit from having a Sittingbourne Town Council, but people who responded to the consultation gave a clear indication, and perhaps they will in a year, 2 or longer express a desire to have a town council, but at that point, that's when they should be given the opportunity to express that view, and we have to take on board the view that's been expressed so far. And I think it's really important that we protect the integrity of that Sittingbourne Town Council area, so that when, or if, hopefully when, people ask for this to be considered again in future, then it is as Sittingbourne was put forward in that proposal. And I think that's the viable suggestion for an area that makes sense in terms of what people understand Sittingbourne to be. So it is regrettable that there's not a recommendation for that, because I think a lot of good would come from it, but we have to respect the consultation responses that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you very much. I have to say I'm very disappointed that there is no recommendation on here for a Sittingbourne Town Council. Swale is a combined, effectively a bit of a history lesson, but the guy who built my house was named Don Allen, and he was the clerk and chief executive of Sittingbourne and District Council, and his picture's outside this chamber. And for Swale to effectively ignore Sittingbourne, the largest town and whole borough, one who I think everyone in probably the room agrees Sittingbourne Town Centre needs some considerable enhancement. It needs some love. It needs some TLC. So not to have a town council means there is an enormous void in our most significant town. And I think without that, we are not actually doing a service for the community or for wider Swale, but most importantly, the residents who live in and around Sittingbourne. And I can't, with all good conscience, vote for number, I think it's 21. As it stands, sorry, let me get the right number. 24 on the recommendations. 23, sorry. And let that go. There'll be, to put it off for another year or two, it may or may not happen, means, and we know with the town council that was created on the island for Sheerness, it takes time. It takes time to get a clerk in place. It takes time for councillors to be voted in. It takes time to put the precept together and then to get out of the starting blocks. By not having a town council means that the community will face a minimum of 4 to 5 years of doing nothing in real terms. So any funding pots that come along, when we become a combined authority, I'm assuming it will happen, although I have my doubts. But if it does, it means we'll be combined with a much larger authority who will have absolutely no interest in doing a thing for Sittingbourne or its town centre. It means funding will probably go elsewhere, where there is a lobby effectively of a town council saying that Faversham or Sheerness or wherever is a greater cause. And we'll be entirely reliant on a fewer number of councillors to speak to those issues. And we've only got to look out the window and see, you know, Sittingbourne Town Centre and what it means to the borough. It is the economic powerhouse in terms of jobs and employment and housing, and yet it is not going to have the same representation as the rest of the borough. And I think that's pretty despicable. And to palm it off into 2 or 3 years' time is actually not doing our job. Now, we've asked, but I think most people are sick to death of LGR, including local residents, most of whom haven't got a Scooby-Doo and aren't really interested because, as I said before, all they care about is if their bin is emptied. But they do care about the town, the high street, and they probably don't realise the net impact it will have by not having a town council. So I'm going to propose that we do create a town council under 23 as an amendment. Do I have a seconder? Thank you.
Okay, we'll speak to the amendment. Sorry? Yeah.
Yep, happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
So, does anyone who wish to speak to the amendment?
Well, I was going to suggest, Chair, if it helps at all, then perhaps if we could take recommendations 1 to 22 on block with your, if you think that's, and then we could.
Quite happy to do that.
Rather than amend the motion.
Yeah, quite happy to
just
do
have a
that.
completely separate motion.
Yeah.
With regard to recommendation 23. Thank you.
I had other people waiting to speak, so was that on that Councillor Gold? Right, okay. Yeah, but you wanted to speak prior to that, didn't you, on the...
Well, Chair, if it helps, if we're going to split them, there may not need to be an amendment because we could just take it as two motions. That's
Okay, are you happy to withdraw that and just take it as two motions, or do you want that formal amendment to stand?
I think what Councillor Whiting is proposing is that we just vote on 1 to 22 first, as there seems to be unanimity, and then vote on recommendation 23 with the amendment.
So recommendation 23, you would members, it doesn't, if you're just voting on that, there doesn't need to be an amendment because if enough people vote not to do it. But because an amendment's been proposed and seconded, it has to be spoken to.
Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this proposal because I think it is something that in the long term is for the benefit. We also have to remember that although we have 6 weeks to propose wards for the new unitary by August, they will only last for the first election. Straight after that, the Boundary Commission will come in and draw up their new boundaries. That happens to happen in all new unitaries because we are limited to what was proportionate years ago. They will have to make proportional wards across the whole of unitary area, which may actually go across current borough lines. So if we want to get in, if there is to be another running of this in 4 years' time or so, then we need, well, if that happens, it may cause divisions which would not be possible to be included in a parish, in a town council area. There can be areas put into the other seats that would then be unwardable in a town centre or a town council. So I think that is something we have to remember about the fact the Boundary Commission is imminent once the new unitary takes place. So I think that's a second reason for me why I think we should perhaps go ahead with Sittingbourne Town Centre, Town Council.
Okay, thank you. So we'll talk to that amendment then. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was the general point, but actually covers this as well, so I'll persevere if I may. Again, it's been said, Councillor Wise, actually, I agree a lot with what you said, and also the thanks to the officers, but also in terms of the actual meetings themselves, I think we also owe a huge thanks to also the members who actually looked to the maps, went up to the TV screen, and what if we put that line there and do that, and the local knowledge of members on this, it's been really, really valuable. And yes, it has prolonged the meetings, worthwhile in doing so, but we wouldn't have got to where we are now if we hadn't had those conversations, which were well chaired by Councillor Whiting. But certainly there was bits which I certainly wouldn't have been knowledgeable enough in some of these areas to think how much of a difference that would make just by a slight cut here or move that line there, etc. So a huge step. Also, say about the officers, everyone involved in it, but also from the members who also did that and were out delivering the leaflets and were out talking to the residents, trying to get this going. So not a small job by any means. Which then brings me on to some of the comments, particularly about the town centre. We are doing the usual thing of dissing the data. We have asked the question to residents. The fact we don't necessarily like the answer is not for us to interpret. They have spoken. Most of us, probably all of us, I guess, would not be in this chamber if we had the majority of residents voting, because they don't. We get the majority of those who actually bother to turn out and vote for the one who gets most of those who bother to turn out. But the solid majority, none of us will probably be here. So we have to go on what is presented to us. And that's the same with Sittingbourne Town Centre. And as much as I agree, I would love to see a town council. I think we are missing the residents are missing the trick, but the residents have told us that they do not want this. We've asked the question in no uncertain terms, and the answer from those who came back, which we have to work with, is a clear no at this point. In a few years' time, it's been mentioned, yes, we could go. Residents may think about, okay, yeah, the changes that's been in that may or may not come through LGR, etc., and where we might be in a year, 2 years, or 3 years' time. It's then those members, and possibly some of us who may not be, won't be in this chamber, but may want to still be involved in local politics, to actually put that argument across and let residents know what is the art of the possible, what could be done if we have by having a town council. Have we failed them by not actually making that case clear enough at this point? But again, I come back to the data that says, no, we don't want it. And again, my final point is still in that same thing. We are here as the elected people to represent the views of the residents that we know. We can't represent what we don't know. And again, that means the residents have said no to a town council. As hard as it and disappointing, and it is disappointing as that may be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, members, I'll take the amendment to the vote then, please. Yeah.
On a point of information, is it possible to recommend for this body or full council to recommend a third consultation specifically on a yes or no on the specific boundaries that are now left for Sittingbourne Town Council? As previously, it was uncertain. You know, there are areas that may be in Merston, might be in Sittingbourne, but wanted to go to Merston. If we just had a yes or no on this is the boundary for Sittingbourne Town Council, would you like to see one established? We would get a clear, because there was some uncertainty about some of the responses we got, a clear response on known boundaries. Are we able to do that?
There is a risk. The statute that it's laid out in statute what you do. You do an initial one to get views and do a consultation, then you do a consultation on what you're going to do. My view, and I think Robin concurs, is that in the event that you went out for something else, all the people that said no to this one are going to say, well, actually, that's not the process. The process is, and you don't. So our view is the process is laid out. It is 2 consultations, and therefore we think it would be problematic. We can't say categorically you can't do it, but we think it would be problematic if you did. And the risk would be, if it was very close, some of the people that said, I thought this was done and dusted, I gave my view, I didn't know about the other one, you have therefore So I think, and the other issue is if it then just comes out, this is recount time. If it then comes out just the other way, then we haven't, there is a thing that people have spoken. As Councillor Bowen said, there is an issue. You have the right as members to recommend to full council. We hear what you say, but in the paraphrasing Councillor Bonney, we believe this is for the greater good in the longer term. You can decide that. You are not slaves to the data. However, we think it would be problematic if you tried to go out again.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Just, if I can, then if that's the end of the debate, I'll just sum up quickly on the amendment, because I've got an enormous sympathy for both Councillor Bonney and Councillor Baldock and others who went into this process hoping perhaps that the residents of Sittingbourne would ask for and require us to recommend that we created a Sittingbourne Town Council. They didn't do that. As unfortunate as that may be and as difficult as that may be. Now, of course, it is entirely up to this committee what it wants to recommend to full council, but I do think the Chief Exec has explained the consequence of that could be very difficult. Councillor Harrison referred to the previous, my previous efforts to get a parish council in Halfway, which failed many years ago. We revisited it, and this time round, the residents have come forward and said that they would like that. So I think there is a process. Councillor Wise was right. There's a process. On this occasion, I think we can't do anything different other than recommend to full council the recommendations that have come out of the working group, which have come from the public responses. And if in the future the residents of Sittingbourne would like to change that, then it will be in their gift and in their power to do so. And demand a recount almost, but that's in the gift of the people of Sittingbourne. So,
thank you, Councillor Worcester.
Just quickly, Chair, on that point, if we're saying, well, the people of Sittingbourne didn't really know the real boundaries because they, it's only just been released under the recommendations. I'm not sure if that's reasonable, because obviously that's exactly the same for the people of Halfway, for the people of Sheerness, for the people of, all their boundaries are being looked at and changed, and they'll be finalised with this vote this evening. So I'm not sure that's a reasonable argument to take this back to any sort of consultation, because otherwise that is an argument for none of these recommendations being particularly valid, which would be a real shame, because there's obviously been a lot of hard work put into it, and you have one argument, but it needs to be reasonable for everybody, not just for one area. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, as I said, we've got that proposed amendment on the floor, proposed by Councillor Bonney, seconded by Councillor Baldock. Those in favour of that amendment? Those against? And abstentions. So that amendment is lost. We're back to the substantive motion, and Councillor Gould, you're next to speak on that.
Thank you. In a similar vein, looking at the transfers at Graveney and Goodnestone and Selling and Bourton parish councils, the figures don't stack up for those either. And there aren't many residents in those areas. This is all largely based on effectively future residents who might come many years down the line when housing is developed. But if you look at the numbers on those ones, that they're all against the transfer, and certainly the parish councils are very much against those transfers. So, if we apply the logic that we've just applied to Sittingbourne Town Council, I feel we probably should be applying the same logic to these transfers. So, in a sense, I'd like to propose that these ones are dropped as well. Whether I'll get a seconder, I don't know. But I feel the logic of the discussion that we've just had would point in that direction.
Yeah, that's why it's wrong. We should have voted for it.
Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to rehash exactly what we had in the working group. When we looked at the data at the working group, we took into account the heat maps, as councillors that were there are fully aware. Those heat maps showed that the vast majority of the no responses came from one particular parish, that particular parish being Ospringe, and mainly around the Eastling area. And they said no to every single item that was on the consultation form in the Faversham area. They said no to increasing the number of councillors, splitting the ward, changing any boundaries. And actually, with the exception of the bit that affected them, where we did take their view into account, we opted that actually probably the people who were going to be affected should be the views that we take into account. So, for example, with the land between Brenley Corner and Desmond Crescent, there are 8 cottages currently there. Of those, I think we had 4 responses, 100% of whom said that they wanted to become part of Faversham. That is why the recommendation was that that land gets transferred to Faversham. Similar with Graveney and Goodnestone, there are two properties. We had 3 residents. 2 said yes, 1 said no. There are a grand total of 3 electors in those 2 properties. So a 2/3 majority. That's why that was slightly different. And I do have sympathy when it comes to Sittingbourne. That's why I abstained on the last one. Because you, as you're fully aware, again, at the working group, I was with you trying to find a way, because I do think that Sittingbourne is going to suffer by not having a town council. But we have looked at the data, we've looked at it based on where people are. And when you look at the numbers as well in the consultation, we've had consultations at this council that get 3 people come back. And we do what those 3 people have said. We had nearly 1,700 on this. Compare that to our neighbour. Our neighbour have gone out twice in the last 5 years for CGR consultations. This time round, Maidstone Borough Council had 600 responses at stage 2. Last time round, when they did a borough-wide one in 2023, they had 599 responses at stage 2 across their entire borough. We got double that just in Sittingbourne area. So we have looked at the data, we've analysed the data, we've applied sensible rules of actually the people that are most likely to be affected and live closest should have their preference prioritised. We've spent hours and hours going over it, and every member has had a really good say on it. And we wouldn't have got there without the officers who were sent back multiple times. And God bless Louise for having to go back the number of times that we sent her back, literally going down to postcode, the last 3 digits of the postcode to confirm that the people were actually in the area they said. We discounted people that had replied from ME4 and CT6. So, you know, if we're going to discount those, you've got to discount the others that aren't in the area that was affected. That's why we got to where we got to, and that's why I can't support changing that particular recommendation, and why I couldn't, even though my heart and head says that Sittingbourne would be better with one, support the last one.
Thank you. Right, so we'll take Councillor Gold's amendment to the vote, please. Those in favour? 3. Those against? And abstentions. Okay, so that's lost. Councillor Gold, thank you very much. Right, can we now take back to our substantive motion, which is the 1 all the way through to 23 on block. Happy to do that. Could I have a proposer for it? Yeah, so Councillor Whiting, proposed by Councillor Whiting, seconded by Councillor Bowen. Those in favour? What did you want to speak on, Councillor Worcester?
Item 6. I did put my hand up previously to speak on a substantive item on item 6.
Yeah, okay then, we'll take that.
So we've heard a lot about this evening of doing what people want and recommendations. So this is the removal of some of the residences from Lucas Close in Queenborough that are initially part of Sheerness Town Council. There was only one person that responded in favour of that item, with lots of people saying no. So as we've heard this evening, listening to 3 people that have responded to consultations or whatnot and doing what the people want, I'd like to support it, because if you look at the map, it would make it a much easier picture, cutting off that element and adding it to Queenborough. But if we're looking at consultation responses, they've said no. So was there any other reason? Can anybody give me any reassurance that I'm able to, with all good conscience, say I would like to support that? Because this, to me, is absolutely fundamental to this review, because town and parish councils control their own precept increases, which means that depending on where these residents sit will depend on what their council tax is actually going to look like. So I'd just like to ask the question, is there any reason why people have said no, but we're still supporting moving Lucas Close out of the Sheerness Town Council area? And I'm more than happy to accept responses to change my mind on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to take Councillor Harrison in the meantime.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say it tuned in when I read it, because it didn't, but the mists are beginning to clear. And I can clearly remember agreeing this in this council. And I can't think where it was supposed to go. It might well have been supposed to go to that commission thingy that was supposed to come in here, and it's coming. Oh Christ, it ain't coming anymore because we've got local government review. But this council actually agreed that, and we'd asked the electoral commission, that's the people, we'd asked the electoral commission to tidy that up. So I mean, I get why you put it in the CGR proposals, but this council, not just this committee, this council has already agreed it.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd put that 2 pence in, as that mist has cleared a bit.
That answers the question, and thank you.
Yeah, if I can, Councillor Harris is absolutely right, Mr. Chair. Chairman, she's there was a full process. It was recommended to Parliament to accept the change. Parliament never got round to it because it was a number of years ago. The officers recommended that we asked again because residents change. But when you actually again look at the heat map, the people that responded were very much. Some of them were without the area that's directly affected. In fact, most of them. And this would be in line with 2 other objectives. One is to tidy boundaries where we can, and in this case using the A249. Secondly, is to create that sense of place, and the residents of that end of Lucas Close use the same facilities and the same accesses and the same schools and everything else as the residents the other end of the road, and so to bring about that sense of place, and for all those reasons, we decided to confirm, if you like, the previous decision of the council and recommend that we should go with the change that's in the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So as I said, we've got the formal proposal from Councillor Whiting, seconded by Councillor Bowen, and that's for 1 to 23 inclusive. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? So that's carried, members. Thank you very much. I just want to hop back now because on my original listing, we skipped past, because it wasn't on there, the GTB item.
Before you do that, can I just explain the number of issues?
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you, members. The Councillor Bonney rightly raised a numbering issue. The bit that did not make it, or the bit that fell off, was the item where you agree the minutes. Councillor Gibson did ask you if you agree the minutes, but that didn't have an agenda item number. That fell off. So that's what the number was. It wasn't another item that's been forgotten. It was the minutes. And Councillor Gibson did ask if you agreed them, and you did. So that's that.
Thank you very much. So yeah, skip back to the item for decision by the committee on recommendations from the Swirl Joint Transportation Board. And again, members, can we agree those? Agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Right, we move on to our next item now, which is the Corporate Equality Scheme. And is that Janet? Janet?
Thank you, Chair. Local authorities are subject to the duties of the Equality Act 2010 and as such are expected to review and or replace their equality objectives every 4 years and monitor progress on actions during the life of the scheme. In July 2024, members of the P&R Committee considered and agreed the Corporate Equality Scheme 2024 to 2028. The scheme was developed after carefully considering all the evidence and data that is available to us, as well as consulting with the public and members of the Council. The priorities and actions were developed alongside the Corporate Plan 2023 to 2027. The Equality Scheme sets out how the Council aim to make Swale a fairer place and for everyone, and how we will tailor our services to meet the needs of residents. As we are midway through the life of the scheme, a review has been carried out and the report at Appendix 1 provides an update on the progress of the priorities and actions. Out of 32 actions, 29 are rated as green, which are either completed or are ongoing due to being part of regular service delivery. 3 are rated as amber, which means they have changed and or the timeline has been revised, but are on track for delivery. No actions have been rated as red. The report is also drawing members' attention to the socio-economic duty, which requires public bodies to consider how strategic decisions, such as budget setting or service changes, impact people suffering from socio-economic disadvantage. Currently, it's not yet legally enforceable for public bodies in England, but in 2024, the government committed to enacting it. The Policy and Communications team are monitoring developments to the proposed changes in legislation and will update members further when statutory guidance becomes available. Members are invited this evening to discuss and note the update report and note the proposed change in legislation to enforce a socio-economic duty for public bodies in England. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So as Janet just outlined, members, this is really for noting at this stage. And the second part of the recommendation, we'll learn about in due course. Councillor Boyne, please.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing in terms of the actual report. Happy to note that. Just a point, though, that in this day and age where it is becoming more and more apparent that that these types of policies and strategies are needed, sadly, and we've experienced that in this very chamber. Fortunately, some of those who I think do not necessarily support equality are not here this evening. And it frustrates me at times when I've done it lots of times. You go for a job interview and we ask an equality and diversity related question. What is equality? And it's treating everybody the same. No, it's not. Not at all. It's making sure people have the same ability and have the same access to being the person which they want to be. That is not treating everybody the same. And we are moving very quickly in a direction on these issues, which is not particularly desirable. But in terms of the report, happy to endorse.
Thank you. So was that a formal proposal? Thank you very much. Councillor Worcester? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, and I second Councillor Bowen's comments, absolutely, and I find it absolutely disappointing that parties that belong to this council would give away their seats on committees where they could come and discuss this and actually explain their side of why they think it's okay for rhetoric, especially around social media work, that absolutely, I completely agree, means that we are actually limiting this conversation. So I'm pleased to see this work coming forward. But I completely would like to see that where we've got an amber on 2.5, us making progress on that, because these areas of our community are emailing me on a weekly, sometimes on a daily basis, saying that they feel potentially marginalised through just normal everyday work. And that should not be a position that anybody should be in 2026. And really, this country as a whole needs to put its money where its mouth is and say that we are here for everybody. And I think Swale should be leading on that. So I'm pleased to see this work coming forward. And I'm pleased to see the progress, if we can make any, on 2.5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member. So I've got a proposer in Councillor Bowen, seconded by Councillor Worcester. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Now we move on to the next item, which is a proposed designation of areas of special control of advertisements. Askers, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So we've been to consultation. I presented the document before consultation, and we've had 20 responses. And post consultation, now we're recommending that 6 conservation areas are designated ASCA in their entirety, and 2 conservation areas, only the commercial center is designated as ASCA. There is Appendix 5, the order that is attached to the report, and that is the order that is to be sent to Secretary of State. And I've now had a response from the legal services, and they have confirmed that the draft statement of reasons provides a clear, proportionate, and legally robust basis for designating the 8 conservation areas as areas of special control of advertisements. It confirms that the statutory tests have been properly addressed, the evidence for each area is sound, and the consultation process was carried out fairly and correctly. They have, however, raised concerns about Newington High Street, and the legals have asked me to provide a fuller explanation, a more elaborate explanation of why we want to designate Newington High Street fully as ASCA. And overall, they've said that the statement demonstrates a lawful, reasoned, and defensible decision-making process, enabling interested parties to understand why the additional advertisement controls are justified. In regards to Newington High Street, as the officer working on this on this project, I think there are enough reasons, and we can substantiate, because sensitivity of Newington High Street's historic village form, the concentration of traditional shop fronts, and the prominence of long views along its curved alignment, the ordinary advertisement regime does not provide sufficient protection, and designating the full conservation area as an ASCA is therefore proportionate and necessary response to safeguard its visual amenity and special character. And so I would provide a fuller explanation, but other than that, legals have said that the statement of reasons is a good, robust document. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the officer for all her work, because her ears are probably bleeding from my years of moaning about this particular issue. I fully endorse the conservation areas that have been put forward, including Newington High Street, and your explanation there. So thank you very much. And I fully support that. I would also like to make the case to this committee from my committee, which is around when this is brought in, we need to enforce this. It's really important. It's no good having a policy and shoving it in the cupboard and doing nothing with it, which quite often happens. So the plea here is that when we are setting a budget, that the appropriate budget is taken for this. And this is not to rob another heritage pot, but this is about quite a few of these are town centres, are major town centres, but also some of those really lovely heritage conservation areas that are not the big towns, but are significant in their own right. So it is really important that people see what's going on and that we send that message to those that put up this really appalling signage that drags down a whole town through everyone piling in with crappy signage, quite frankly. And this is about, improving an area, and that can only be done with some resourcing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wise, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Talking about responses to consultations, have to note that I think there was only 2 councillors that responded to this, which is really disappointing because plenty of us have raised points like Councillor Bonney has mentioned. There was lots of discussion at the Economy and Property Committee about the need to have these controls in place. But I do recognise one of those members' consultation responses, actually, and I wholeheartedly agree with myself because the concern is about the enforcement of this, and I've raised this with other stuff. There is no point us having the PSPO in Sittingbourne High Street about street drinking when people literally sit underneath the sign street drinking. It all boils down to the enforcement, because otherwise you set a standard and expectation amongst residents that is never met. And I think this is a really good piece of work. I think the way that they are justified, the points made about so many of these areas being heritage at risk, really underscores the need for us to have this, but it really underscores the need for this council to enforce it. We must enforce it. There are too many glaring examples in too many of these areas that show why this is so sorely needed. So we need to make sure that we have not just the funding, but the will to enforce this. It is a difficult process, I know, to enforce with these sorts of things, but it's only by showing that we will follow through that we will start to see the change that this sort of control can deliver for our areas. And that's right across all of these areas. I totally support that this provides a really good starting point as well for where we need to make sure these efforts are directed to really enhance these conservation areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring Joanne, if I might.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to chip in on those last few points for members' comfort, there was a debate at Economy and Property Committee last week on this exact topic, and members voted to bring a paper to Policy and Resources as soon as possible, so that will be September, suggesting that the Heritage Strategy Reserve is reprioritised towards enforcement, particularly of conservation areas and heritage assets. So that paper will be coming forward on exactly that topic at, I think, the next meeting of this committee. Thank you.
I should have said spoiler alert, shouldn't I? Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was glad that they got on with this work as well, because before she was chewing Jamil's ear off, I had to put up with it. And yeah, there was nothing I could do about it. So I'm also, I just want to put it on record, I'm really pleased to see an officer fight back against some of the old legal jargon and legal challenges and actually stand up for what the members actually want. So I just think that's really, really encouraging. I'm happy to propose all the recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting, please.
And I'm happy to second them if you need a seconder, Chair. And I just wanted to thank Jamil for the work she has done on this. I was one of those members, and there were others, that went back to Jamil with with suggestions about how the policies could be made better. One of mine was to extend the area in Queenborough, which happened in the recommendations in front of us, and it's gone down very well in the town. That has occurred, and it does help protect those conservation areas. This is another vital a tool in the armoury, if you like, of those that we pay to enforce these things, and hopefully that extra money will pay for more enforcement, so that we can protect those conservation areas to the best of our ability. And I think this piece of work helps do that enormously. And just thanks to Jamil and the team for getting us where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, agree. Good report, great report. And welcome, and particularly also Tenement, Cellar Hill and Green Street in Tenement Linstead. Couple of points. The one actually serious one. So, sometimes in conservation areas, you will have some businesses which their advertising is such which actually adds to the area. Little vintage tea shops, for example. Oh God, anyway, I'm doing hand movement as well now. Things like that which can actually add to the character and the atmosphere of that area. And we shouldn't be looking to knock that, I don't think. We've got one in Green Street in Tenement that's recently opened, not a few months ago. Little cafe, coffee shop type place. It's got a good reputation. Nice place to go for a sandwich. On the other hand, then you get those, usually around circus and fun fair dates, where you'll suddenly find your lampposts and things like that are being blitzed by stuff, and they never then come back and take them back down again, and somebody has to do it. Or they fall off and then litter in the road. Great thumbs up, makes the place look absolutely desirable. So it is right, it does come down to enforcement, and we've got to get serious on this, and excuse the French, not take any shit from the people who do this. Excuse the French. Tongue in cheek, slightly. Sittingbourne High Street, we have a piece of advertising that's always there, and it comes back to my first point for Burton's, just above where the old nightclub is. It's in concrete. Should never change that because that is part of the high street. But it's advertising a company that actually is no longer in the high street as well. And so that's slightly tongue-in-cheek. And my last one is very much tongue-in-cheek. But we have also got, recently, we have in all these conservation centres are known in the Green Street one, where this council have also been going around sticking sticky labels on bins, which doesn't always look great. Advertising, do put this in your bin, don't put that in your bin. Advertising Swale Borough Council, because it's got a logo on it, but we're adding to it. I'm not saying that's a problem, but I'm just highlighting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions based on the Blue Town and Royal Historic Dockyard area. Is that okay? Sorry to ask. Absolutely in favour of it, obviously, but I just wondered if you could explain to me a little bit more about the reasons for not extending the ASCA to cover the entire conservation area. Sorry, maybe it's my misunderstanding, because obviously Blue Town has very little residential housing, if that makes sense, and that to me means that area needs much more support than less support, because we've seen, for example, Peel Ports is a lovely company, but they do run the dockyard at the moment. We already have exceptionally limited access to any sort of heritage that sits within the dockyard zone, if that makes sense. I was only there today, see some beautiful buildings. But also I noticed that if we're not overseeing what they're doing in terms of that land with regards to advertising on those buildings or how they're using those historical sites, how are we really looking at how we're preserving that heritage within inside the dockyard land? And I know we had a master plan, but I don't think that's been really relevant for the last couple of years, has it? But could you help me understand that a little bit more, please?
For the Sheerness Dockyard, we've restricted it to a very small area because there are a number of reasons. First, the the dockyard itself is a restricted zone, and doing ASCA there would not be justified enough. It would be contrary to the purpose of that area, although it is a conservation area and it does have a lot of important listed buildings. But in terms of purpose of ASCA, we're trying to maintain and retain and refurbish our high streets. It's more to do with shop fronts. It's more to do with the visual amenity of these commercial centers. And what you're saying is right, but I think we, as the first starting point, we should be a little more reasonable about what we are trying to implement. And then we have to review it in 5 years' time anyway. And then we can review it and see whether we need to extend it or we need to reduce it more. And by that time, we would have hopefully achieved quite a lot by what we're trying to achieve here in maintaining our high streets and shop fronts, and also develop a mindset towards sensible advertising. That's what I.
So just to come back on that, Jamil, sorry, this is entirely a learning curve for me. Is there any way we could take a conversation out of this meeting to discuss other ways that you might be able to highlight best supports those historic areas of the dockyard in a different way, if that's possible? There might not be, but I'd be really grateful for that conversation because, like I say, I was only in there today and it is really evident of the sadness that those buildings are kind of going under, and we know we've already lost massive amount of heritage out of that dockyard with the loss of some of those really important national historic buildings. So thank you very much. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to take one more on this. Councillor Gibson, the other Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Only really to, I suppose, second 2 points and disagree lightly with one, to Councillor Bowen's point about sensible advertising and things contributing to the feel of the town. Clearly, that the proposal here is that this is about new advertisements. So the giant lettering on Shepherd Neames building in Faversham would obviously be in breach if it were new, but is clearly a vital part of our town's existing heritage, as are many of the pub signs that are much higher than this proposed signage rule. But clearly they would not be affected by this and would continue to run and hopefully be refreshed as they often are. And to Councillor Worcester's point, my residents would not forgive me if I did not welcome the news that she believes Peel Ports are a good neighbour. That is not a universally shared experience, and Faversham's Bridge residents would disagree. Thank you.
Thank you. So it was originally proposed, I think I've lost it now, Councillor Baldock, did you propose it? Right, it's a long time ago. Right, so Councillor Baldock's proposed it and Councillor Worcester's happy to second. Those in favour? That's unanimous, members, and thank you very much as always, Jamil. Fantastic report, thank you. So, members, the real thing to have, I think, now is a hydration break. So, should we have a hydration break, but extend it beyond the normal, and we'll have a 10-minute hydration break? Thank you. Welcome back. The next item on the agenda is the local plan review, Regulation 19 consultation launch. And I'll thank our officers to introduce it. Natalie.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the report before you presents the draft Regulation 19 local plan that is set out in Appendix 1, the draft sustainability appraisal, the draft habitats regulation assessment, and the draft infrastructure delivery plan and schedule. The report sets out the background to the recommendations made by the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group during its meeting on the 30th of June with regard to the start of the Local Plan Regulation 19 consultation. Appendix 6 is a table of the comments made, changes requested, and the Office's responses to those comments made at the meeting. These changes have been made to the Regulation 19 version of the Local Plan in Appendix 1. So the Regulation 19 has been drafted using feedback from previous PTPWG and PNR meetings and previous rounds of public consultation, most notably the last Regulation 18 consultation in January this year. So this would be a formal Regulation 19 consultation stage, seeking feedback from stakeholders and the public. The consultation period is intended to run from the 10th of August until the 21st of September, and officers are working with the communications team on a variety of engagement opportunities to enable wide-ranging participation. The draft guidance note that was appended at Appendix 6 to the PTPWG report explains how respondents and residents can make their points clearly for the planning inspector and what terminology they need to use, as it is specifically set out in regulations how they must respond, and that guidance note will be made public on the website and on all our social media and the usual channels so that it is very clear for people how to engage in this consultation. Section 2 of the report sets out the history of the local plan review that got the council to this point. But in summary, the key decisions were when the council agreed a new local development scheme at full council on the 30th of July 2025, which agreed to submit a local plan by December 2026, and the local plan growth strategy and sites for allocation, which were agreed at full council on the 1st of April 2026. So the policies maps which will accompany the Regulation 19 for consultation are being finalised as we speak, both for the interactive mapping system, which you have been provided with a link for in paragraph 2.14 of the report, and for the map inserts for the Regulation 19 document itself. I would like to thank everyone that's been involved in the drafting for this document. It's been a huge team effort with colleagues from all departments of the council assisting, and obviously members. So for clarity, I will run through the report recommendations. They are lengthy, so please bear with me. They are 1, to recommend the changes to the proposed housing and employment allocations as set out in Table 1 and paragraphs 2.2 to 2.6 to full council for approval. 2, to recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning, in consultation with the PTPWG chair, any required updates to and or deletions of sites with extant planning permissions. 3, to note that the completion of the transport and air quality modelling is awaited and that engagement between PTPWG and the consultants will be ongoing. 4, to recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning, in consultation with the PTPWG chair, any required updates and or deletion to policies, development management, strategic or allocation ones, if required, once the transport and air quality modelling, sustainability appraisal and habitats regulation assessments are complete. 5, to note that the Level 2 strategic flood risk assessment is awaited and may recommend mitigations which will need to be added to relevant allocation policies, and recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning, in consultation with the PTPWG chair, any required updates to policies, development management, strategic or allocation, if required, once assessment is complete. 6, to provide comment on, as appropriate, and recommend the Local Plan Regulation 19 document in Appendix 1, the draft sustainability appraisal in Appendix 2, the draft habitat regulation assessment in Appendix 3, and the draft infrastructure delivery plan in Appendix 4 to full council for approval for consultation purposes. And finally, 7, to recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning, in consultation with the PTPWG chair, any minor amendments and corrections to the Local Plan Regulation 19 document prior to the start of the consultation period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Natalie. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, at very short notice, we have been given a tabled update with a proposed or possible alternative scenario. A scenario which I would probably be favourable to, although I haven't yet found the 11 removed sites. But what does this say? This says we could have reasonably put forward a proposed plan with these numbers. Do you know what the difference between these numbers and the proposed scenario 4 would have been? 101. That's the difference between the bobbing site going in or the Faversham extension. That is completely different to the advice and the information we were given when we made this decision at a previous PTPWG and the full council. We were told we were not anywhere near. If we didn't substitute bobbing, we would not have a satisfactory number. Scenario 1 is now being chosen, which is actually closer than what we were being told we couldn't do. I think this throws into question the decision that was made at full council. The assumptions councillors were working under, because there were councillors who said, we don't like this, but we can't see any alternative, the numbers don't add up. Now we know, actually, they probably did. And it says, we could, in practice, supply will be higher once recent permissions are factored in, the invisible list. But we weren't allowed to consider in full council, but now it's reasonable to consider them. So for all those people who voted for the Bobbing Garden Village to go in, instead of a Faversham extension because they didn't think the numbers added up, have been sold a duff. We now find out these extra permissions are reasonable, and we find out we can take 899 smaller sites out, or 899 smaller units out, leaving a gap of just 101. And that's not, we met the target for the LHN. What we didn't have was the target for the 5% buffer. We've seen from this, councillors made a decision on duff information or duff understanding. And I think that seriously calls into account the decisions that we've made.
Yeah, Natalie?
Thank you, Chair. I understand the tabled update on the sustainability appraisal was emailed out on Friday lunchtime. I will pass over to my colleague Onawali because it's about the sustainability appraisal, which looks at reasonable alternatives differently to the development scenarios within the local plan. So they are not the same thing, but I will let Onawali explain this in more detail.
Thank you. What the job of the essay is to consider alternative means that the target of or the aspiration of the plan can be met. So it's natural for it to consider a scenario where the target isn't going to be met because all of the constraints are brought into consideration. And if you check the essay, this is clearly indicated that scenario 2 still performs favorably amongst all the scenarios that are considered. It is only reasonable to consider that scenario 1 in light of Bobbing receiving that resolution to grant. But that doesn't mean it is an ideal scenario to go forward with. And the essay clearly states that is not does not perform favorably compared to the scenario 2, because the preferred approach is scenario 2, and that is still reasonable to go forward with as shown in the essay. So the scenario 1 is just brought in because of Bobbing receiving that resolution to grant, which enables the essay discard the previous other scenarios that had to do with ISTED, and then make it reasonable to consider that scenario 1 that was introduced. But overall, scenario 2, which is the preferred approach that was selected by the PTBWG, is reasonable and performs better than other scenario, as stated in the essay. Thank you.
Thank you. So that doesn't really change the thing. We've got an extra scenario which we could adopt tonight. I hear the recommendations. Personally, I think we should look at it. The other thing I'm really concerned about is we now know we are going to have heard the result of the Heisted appeal by the end of September, considerably earlier than we had thought. Now, if that comes back in a negative fashion, we will be going in with nearly 20,000. That's way above what we need to. I think we need to really seriously consider where we are on this. This has come forward a lot quicker. Do we really want to have committed to all 3 garden villages, where most of us were elected to fight that? I think we need. What are we? If Heisted comes back in the negative, what are we able to do? Because we have to bear in mind, bobbing was only granted permission because several of the councillors said we can't oppose this because we voted for it last week. Now, on that basis, you are creating a double cycle of reinforcement based on something that people didn't want. So I think you've got to be really careful going ahead now on the basis of this vastly over housing figure. We were elected to fight the housing targets. We were elected by the people of Sittingbourne and Sheppey and Faversham to fight the imposed housing targets. And what we're going to agree instead is potentially 10% above what we need to. We heard earlier a lot of words about what we were elected for, how we've got to do what our residents want. Our residents do not want us to submit a local plan that will take us 10% over what we needed to have committed.
Thank you. Joanne?
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points to address there, if I may. So I'll start with the alternative scenarios. The scenarios for modelling are different to the growth options that members have chosen. So members have chosen growth option 4. The scenarios for modelling test that. And as Onawali said, the growth option is coming out as the best of those. The scenario that's been added in looks at if units fall by the wayside as we go through the process. And members chose to add in a 5% buffer to the housing target that we were aiming for because things do fall by the wayside, because it's a dynamic process. So it's not a case that we can choose that scenario tonight. It's a scenario for modelling. It's not a growth option. And on the point about the Heisted decision, if I may, so yes, we understand that timescale has been brought forward. We were operating to the Minister's statement it would be mid-autumn at the earliest. We now understand from PINS that the inspector has submitted her report to the Secretary of State, and PINS expects his verdict by the 30th of September. We took some legal advice, as you would probably expect, on how those two processes interrelate. We've been doing that all the way through, but with that new decision date, we took legal advice over the last few days. And that legal advice is carry on regardless. Sorry, I didn't mean to make a film pun. The two processes are separate and distinct. At the point at which we get a decision from the Secretary of State, if that consents one or both of the applications, we will then need to have a look at the soundness and compliance of the local plan in that specific situation. But because the Heisted numbers, as we said to you before, will not deliver for the 5-year housing land supply, they are all expected to come in at the very back end of the plan period. If they do come in, when we get to the point of reviewing the local plan, that is likely to be the most appropriate time then to factor that new information in. So the legal advice that we had literally fresh in today is carry on this. The accelerated decision timescale, if that is when we get the decision, is no reason to not proceed on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It will come as no surprise to many of you that my recollection of those council meetings differs slightly from Councillor Baldock's. It was my recollection of the planning meeting where we granted bobbing that all of those councillors present acted entirely appropriately and used their best planning judgment to the best of their knowledge and ability to make that decision, as we all always do. And that is my memory. It was also my memory that we were given a great deal of information at PTPWG and full council about all of the options and made the decision on those basis. And that is how we have proceeded. On this report before us tonight, I want to thank the officers for the extraordinary amount of work. You know, the huge reams of paper are testament to the colossal effort that has been put in by officers and members over the past several years. I want to particularly thank Councillor Braun for chairing PTPWG in my absence. He did a sterling job watching it back, so thank you very much for that, and for all members for their engagement during that process. As I said, the beginning of the plan makes clear, this is a plan built on compromise. None of those things are ever perfect. It cannot be perfect. It can simply do the best we can for our borough. And though some of you may have been elected to oppose housing, some of us were elected to deliver affordable housing for our residents that desperately need it. All of us, I hope, were elected to deliver the vital infrastructure that our borough needs. All of us, I hope, were elected to support our environment, our biodiversity, and our vital wetlands. And this plan does lots of those things. It is a great plan for delivering on those objectives. So I'm happy to propose the recommendations this evening, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll start just by echoing the thoughts and comments of Councillor Gisborne and thank him for his chairmanship of the working group, which I think was excellent. Again, there were long nights, they were burning the candle at both ends, but it was they were thorough and well-run meetings, and I think we've come up with a plan, as Councillor Gibson says. It won't achieve everything for everybody, and it will let some people down. It's bound to. But it's a plan that I'm comfortable with recommending to full council. I had a number of comments that I've taken up with Natalie, and I'm very grateful for her assurances that those things are being looked at, and I won't go into all of them, but there were three things in particular I just wanted to highlight from members' point of view. I think the Queenborough and Rushenden scenario where Homes England are pushing back on delivering the number of houses that they originally said they wanted to. I'm grateful to Natalie and her team who are pushing hard for a greater number of homes than Homes England want to deliver, and using the methodologies that I think will stand up to scrutiny to do that. I'm grateful for that. The education elements, I think, within the IPD are very, very shaky indeed on Sheppey. I'll talk about Sheppey's education scenario for the secondary school education. I don't think the plan adequately addresses that, and I know that Natalie and the team are talking to KCC to get some more up-to-date figures. We've got 1,100, I think, extra homes planned for Sheppey in this plan. Many of those are in Eastern Sheppey, where there already aren't enough spaces, and KCC's plans to sort that out simply are not good enough. And I know, again, that Natalie and the team are are across all of that and talking to KCC to update things before the plan, hopefully before it comes to full council, if not, certainly before it's published. And the third thing, just very grateful for members of the working group who supported the inclusion of a Swale Parkway station in the IPD. Very grateful for that, and it's great to see it. It's taken some years, but we finally got a line in the IPD that says that we should be doing something to upgrade Swale Station to, if nothing else, to try to improve the congestion issues that we have in Sheerness and Sittingbourne as commuters try to access the stations there by giving them an alternative. And for those, they're the three things. There was a whole range of things that I know the team are doing in the background to get perfect for where we're going with this. And I just want to thank them for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. I was probably need a bit of guidance, but we appear to still have on Sheppey the rule that no development has to come forward with any social housing commitment for developments on Sheppey. I would have thought the local plan would have been the ideal place to rectify that, but I'm not seeing any movement towards that. For example, Cockleshell Walk is coming forward, which is a fantastic bit of work from SWAL. We've got development sites in Sheerness, for example, that are crying out for development of social housing, so not affordable housing, but social housing, to really fulfil the need of those residents. That would absolutely mean that more families, more local people from Sheppey could absolutely stay in their residence, their community, their area of network support. But I've yet to see that reflected in much of the council's work. So it was just a comment really to say that the more work we can do to put social housing back on Sheppey, I'm sure will be appreciated by everybody, rather than 5-bedroom houses that not a lot of the population on Sheppey can actually afford to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Worcester is correct. The adopted local plan bearing fruits has very low to non-existing affordable housing targets on the Isle of Sheppey. At the moment, they are the adopted policies, so that's what the framework that plan applications have to work with. As part of developing this local plan, we have a development management policy in there which is seeking 30% affordable housing on greenfield sites across the whole of the borough, so that includes the Isle of Sheppey. It's also seeking 10% affordable housing on brownfield sites across the whole of the borough as well. So at this stage, we're still early in the drafting process, so we can't really apply any weight to the policies in this local plan. But as it moves forward to consultation, as it moves forward to submission, those policies will gain greater weight and become material considerations in planning applications.
Can I come back on that, Chair, please? Absolutely take your point, and affordable housing absolutely does have a place within the housing setup, but we have to absolutely look at the need of local areas, and the need for Sheppey is for social housing, not affordable housing. And that really does play to the high numbers of, for instance, people that are already taking up temporary accommodation on Sheppey, HMOs. They need that next step and able to absolutely potentially have the local authority as a housing partner. And for the life of me, if other areas in the country can offer social housing, then I absolutely think the crying need on Sheppey is for the social housing, as opposed to well received but affordable housing, because even affordable housing is, I don't think, what the label says on the tin for the majority of residents that come from an area that you're looking at well under the average wage earning capacity to be able to go on full accommodation like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Got my hobby horse there, Councillor Worcester. Yes, it's in there. I think to address the paper as a whole, I think we start with a huge thank you to the officers. This is what, 10 years in the making now? 10 years, give or take? 10 years in the making. And I think we've certainly learned over the last 5 years what happens when you don't get a local plan review through in a reasonable time. You end up with planning applications for huge developments that end up in front of the Secretary of State rather than being decided in this chamber. And we end up with developments that none of us wanted. And we see parishes across the area having to go to judicial review on decisions taken by planning inspectors. That's happened in Faversham, it's happened in Rodmersham, it's happened in Borden, it's happened everywhere. And that is our fault. We cannot shift away from that. We, as members, should have developed a plan and supported a plan before now. So we have got to move forward. This is the right move to move forward. And yeah, I would dearly love to see social housing rather than affordable housing as the requirement. I think everybody would, but we've got to live in the real world. There is social housing in and of itself is expensive. We're struggling right now to get developers 106 allocations for any affordable housing actually taken up, even in the parts of the borough where house prices are high enough that viability isn't really a concern, because the housing associations just haven't got the cash in the bank to make the purchase. or are reluctant to do so for whatever reason in this borough at the moment. So we've got to be realistic. Yes, the allocations do allow for that. Grant funding is where the answer is for that issue. And it's working with our partners. And if we can demonstrate that, as I think we can through this and taking it forward to Reg 19, if we can demonstrate that we have thought things through, that we have looked at planning in a positive light, that we have looked at how can we make it not only at the least worst, but that our policy position is as best as it can possibly be, so that our partners, the developers, the housing associations, and our partners in government can look at it and go, actually, this is a really clear local plan that enables me to build the houses that are needed for the people in this area. If we can be sure of that, then we'll have done our job and done it well, and we will get those affordable houses and those social rent houses. At the moment, we're still in this desperate, confused state. And if you're looking at it as a social housing landlord, you're looking and going, well, we don't know what the policy is going to be there yet. We don't know whether that policy is going to go through. There's no certainty. And that's what the market wants. The market wants certainty. And as soon as you have it, then people are willing to invest. And I think this is a plan that, yeah, it's full of compromise. There's loads in here that I wouldn't have wanted. There's plenty in there that I know others around the table wouldn't have wanted. And if you'd offered it to me in 2019, I'd have probably said, no, thank you. But after those years of living in the real world, this is probably the best we're going to get. And I think recommending it to full council is the right thing to do. And I think officers have done a sterling job. And yeah, I think all of us at one stage or another had a go about something in it. All of us have probably had to apologise a morning after for something in this, for something we've said, because, no, I hated that. But actually, they've used their professional judgment and led us on the right path. So a huge thank you, and let's progress this and do the very best that we can for the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what Councillor Worcester says about social housing, and maybe we're being presumptuous because St Burnham of Mank is coming, and when he waves his magic wand, we're going to get social housing. So, you know, maybe he's going to be in a matter of a week or so. The speed he's going, by September we could have new policies and build a load in. So maybe we should wait until Sir Andy has done his bit.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Councillor Ben J. Takes us back, but as well as the 5 years that this should have been sorted out, I estimate we've shelled out a good 5 mil that we could have spent on services for our residents and benefits for our residents, instead of which we've been shelling out on this local plan over and over and over and over again. And it's just wasted. We need to get on. I would also offer my thanks to the officers' chair, but also Councillor Charles Gibson and Councillor Hayden Braun. It reminds me, this is just very briefly, the same poison chalice chairmanship as we used to call the Gypsy Working Party back in the day. It was, oh no, I can't do that. But they have both done a sterling job on that. I wouldn't have wanted it. I was going to say on the social housing, Councillor Martins said about the lack of money that housing associations have for the social housing. And it's only really councils and housing associations that do the social housing. The government, it always used to be social housing. The government changed the rules and said, no, we're not having social housing anymore. We're going to have affordable housing. And up and down this country, we all went, but it isn't affordable for my residents. But that was, hey-ho, suck it up. That's the way it's going to be. If you can persuade developers, I can see the officer there briefing us, James. If developers are generous enough to not only give you the 20% affordable, but also 20% social, then you're lucky, aren't you? Which developer's going to do that in this country? No way. So, I hope that if there is a change of leader, that he might change the NPPF thing and scrub out affordable and put back in social, because that is what is needed to get us back on track. Because, you know, I don't know where in this country affordable housing is actually affordable, because for the vast majority of people, it is not. So, yeah, you know, none of this is ideal. It might have been if we'd have sorted it out when we should have done, but we are where we are. I'm quite happy to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate Councillor Whiting, really, with the education, especially at the eastern end of the island. There are still families a year later still fighting for children's places. And it really does need, and we was told at the Council of Residents Forum that next year is going to be even worse, with 150 odd spaces short. So I just really think we need to sort of, as much as we can, identify that the eastern end of the island is transport-wise, education-wise and employment, because I noticed there was a bit on here that said 295 employment units at sort of Laysdown Eastchurch. I'd like to know how many of them, though, are seasonal, because obviously a lot of the employment at the eastern end of the island is seasonal. So I'd just like to bear that in mind when sort of working through things.
Thank you. Natalie?
Yes, any jobs that are proposed through the local plan in employment figures are always permanent, not seasonal jobs. So they would be, if they're within the local plan as an employment allocation, they are always, they are always, I think, non-seasonal. Doesn't make sense, sorry, but year-round jobs, sorry. If you've got the page number, if you email me, I can get back to you with specifics on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come across as Mr. Grumpy in a second, and it's not intended. First of all, this is not in having to dig at the chair of the PTPWG at all. It's quite the opposite. I think they've done a fantastic job with this. My query, and if it's right, it's absolutely fine, but I want to just check in terms of the recommendations. PTPWG is a working group. It has no decision-making powers, which is why this report comes here and then goes to full council. So I'm not having to go at the chair or chairmanship at all. But in terms of process, is it wise to have the consultations listed here by the head of planning in consultation with the chair of PTPWG, which is a working group and not a decision-making group? Are we allowed to do that? And if it's preferable, sorry, Tim, would it not be wiser to potentially have the chair of P&R included in that group as well? So I'm not having to go or anything like that. I just want to check that actually is an appropriate way to do this.
Yeah, Robin.
So ultimately, the decision is being made by this committee, which is a decision-making committee, and obviously then goes on to council. So the authority for that person to be the appropriate consultee will have been given by a member decision. So from that point of view, I think there's no issue with that. It could be, for example, the chair of another committee. I would have imagined that the logic of, and it is, bearing in mind, it's the officer's decision. So the person is being consulted with. It's not their decision to take it as a consultation, not a rubber stamping exercise. But then the logic would surely be that the person who has the best information in order to have a sensible conversation with is the chair of PTPWG rather than the chair of P&R. Though if the chair of P&R feels differently about that, then obviously the chair of P&R can say so.
Right, thank you for that. And it comes back to the actual decision making, which we can agree that as a group, but again, when it goes to PTPW, they're a working group. It's okay if that's the will of this committee. Absolutely fine, and nothing. They totally accept your response, Robin.
The member decision is to delegate it to the officer, who will consult with that member. that's the that's the decision that's being made. So that member who is a member of a non-decision making working group is being consulted with, but the delegated decision making authority sits with the officer, and obviously members delegating decisions to officers is perfectly normal.
Okay, Councillor Gibson.
I will take the opportunity to come back because I forgot to say something earlier, which is there is an excellent policy in here about water quality and water sustainability, which I wanted to personally thank Councillor Speed for his contribution to making that happen and all the work officers did following that up, because that is kind of really class leading and we should be really very proud of bringing that forward. And to Councillor Bowen's point, I am entirely relaxed about changing that phrase to Councillors Gibson, if that would make them more comfortable. I'm very happy to share.
And I'm far too gracious to take that offer on. Thank you. So, members, could I have a proposer for, we'll take them on block? Councillor Whiting, well, I'll do Councillor Gibson as chair and then Councillor Whiting as seconder.
Sorry, Chair, what are we taking a vote on?
On all of the recommendations.
I did indicate to speak.
You did.
Yep. Okay, right, thank you. First of all, I should make a declaration. I do chair the 5 parishes. I wasn't in the room when you started. And the other one is I'm a director of Rainbow Homes, which will come up later. So before you enter that item, I think I probably need to leave the room as I'm a director. But I'm sure the chief executive will chip in on thoughts on that because there's another councillor in the chamber on that one. Right. I just wanted to ask a question of the officer. When we were at the working group, we raised some points on specific wording within the Reg 19 that the officer was going to take away and make some changes. Has that been done? Because in a document that's published, attached to this agenda, I'm not sure it has been.
Yes, so all the comments that were made at PTPWG have been listed in Appendix 6 of this report. And then those changes have been made within the document, the Reg 19 document that is in Appendix 1.
Okay, so I couldn't see the change to, I think we were going to ask for a master plan on Kent Science Park, do you remember?
Yeah, I think my colleagues are saying that is in there.
Right, okay. I have to trust that it is, and I didn't see that. This is a sort of a wider point, really. I think that members should be taking on board. We've got some quite big sites. Obviously, we've got 2 significant sites where there's been a resolution to grant, but we spend a lot of time on large sites quibbling over what the infrastructure should be, etc. And all large sites, if we are to get certainty, as we've mentioned earlier, which is what the local plan is supposed to do, I think where there are sites of 500 or more, we should be requesting master plans for those sites. So not just the employment site that I'd previously mentioned, but on a more generic basis. And why that's important is when we look at the various reports before us tonight that are pended, when we talk about things like walking and cycling and all the mitigation, if we don't have master plans, it is very difficult to piece together the infrastructure. And the points raised earlier by the councillors about education on the island, this drives straight into that point, is that if you don't have a master plan, you can't hold those sites, the feet of the developers to the fire to say, this is what the expectation was in the original plan when it was allocated. And I think we haven't been brilliant at Swale in doing that. So I would suggest that we should be requesting master plans on major sites. We talk about certainty. I do wonder under the infrastructure delivery plan whether we've got enough in there for triggers, because as we've talked about earlier, if something fails to come forward, it causes chaos. Now, we've had Junction 5 upgrade, took years to be brought about, and then we ended up with Grampian conditions, which put a significant hold on our infrastructure. So under the infrastructure delivery plan, if a significant site fails to come forward with its delivery of infrastructure, whether there is sufficient teeth in here to prevent any further development. And this would then mean we can compel these things to come forward, or other things are stopped. Because what we've had is a pile-on effect. You know, someone forgets to do something, or someone decides it's not economic to do something. So a bit of infrastructure that's supposed to be delivered over here, secondary school in Northwest Sittingbourne is a really good example, and then it causes chaos. So I do think we need to have teeth. And I'm not entirely convinced, and I'll go with the officer to come back to me and to the committee, where what could we do to tighten that up before it goes out to consultation. And finally, the delegation. I do have grave doubts about a delegation where these are really substantial issues that are extremely controversial, that we are putting into the hands of an officer only in consultation with either the chair of the working group, or there was a mention earlier of the chair of this committee. I think we need to have much better control, because you're effectively, as a committee, we are just casting that off. We are palming that off and dismissing our control. And I just don't think that's good enough. So I'm going to suggest that the delegation is to the officer, but it needs to come back to the committee member. We need to be fully aware, this committee needs to be fully aware of what is going on. We're talking about major sites here, major bits of infrastructure. And I really don't think it's good enough to palm that off. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay, members, we've got an amendment proposed and duly seconded. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chair. Much of this goes back to some of the
Sorry, apologies. Could you just give us the wording just for clarity?
Yeah, I think currently, let's have a look. Hold on, let me go back to my papers. Hold on. Which one is it?
So, to replace chair of PTPWG.
That's it.
The Policy and Resources Committee.
Yeah, so it's the replacement on item 2 of the recommendations. So to recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning in consultation with the planning and transportation working group chair. I'm suggesting that's the Policy and Resources Committee, because the Policy and Resources Committee is ultimately responsible. We are sat here.
Thank you. Robin.
So whilst I have no sense on the rightness or otherwise of the motion, its members' decision to make about who is delegated, that is no longer an officer's delegation. That's a delegation to this committee in practice. So that's not, I don't know if that's what you're trying to achieve, and if it is, then you might as well take the officer bit out of it entirely and it's just delegated to this committee to make the decision. But then actually that's a slightly odd thing, because what we're talking about is a council decision that's been delegated, in the substantive decisions made by council, and then these other bits are the bits that are being picked up, that in order that the thing comes forward, in a completed sense after the event, it's like amendments and things. So for me, that's no longer a delegation to an officer, and therefore I don't think it's actually a tenable motion of itself or amendment of itself, and perhaps it needs to be rethought through.
Thank you, Chair. If I could comment as well, just to add that in each situation where a delegation is suggested, it notes required updates and it links it back to some documentation. So it's not giving officers sort of free rein to change the documents. It's saying if there is a trail that an update to a document piece suggests X, we will consult with the chair or whoever to make that necessary change. The only one where it doesn't say required is the final delegation, which talks about minor amendments and corrections, and that's the typo delegation. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boyne.
Thank you, Chair. Robin's just said what I was going to say, and I do have some sympathy with what Councillor Bonnie has just said, but that is not a delegation. That removes the delegation and brings everything back to this committee, and therefore is going to prolong the process so much longer because we don't meet that frequently. Or we're going to have potentially lots and lots of extraordinary meetings for any decision. So I do sympathise, but that's not a delegation at all. So I can't vote for that. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Ditto that Robin said what I was going to say. I am happy with the original delegation and consultation with either Councillor Gibson or Councillor Gibson. I'm easy on it.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, we have seen how easily we delegate. I mean, how hard it is to recoup or regather the powers that we delegate. We are discussing that in a constitution working group recently. The principle is, and the people who get the blame are the councillors. We carry the can. We are the people who, if something goes wrong, if there's a change, why has that happened? And if a decision is delegated, we don't have a chance to have an input into it, yet we still take responsibility, especially in the eyes of the public. And this is about updates to and or deletions of sites. So this isn't just, correcting a typo. This isn't just about minor things. This is about quite important stuff. So we need to be careful when we keep giving powers away that we can't then call back. Because sometimes things are done that we are not happy with and we are powerless to adjust them. And yet we are still responsible. And I don't think we should be responsible for decisions that we can't call back. So I'm not in favour of delegating this. If you're talking about deletions of sites and things, that's quite important. We may not want it to have regular, extraordinary policy and resources committee meetings, but I think this needs member oversight, democratic member oversight, not a chat with somebody, and there to be proper accountability as councillors. So, I think that what Monique or Councillor Bonnie has proposed is a good step forward. I mean, it's up to this committee if it wants to find another way to do it democratically. We can look at that in the future, but certainly we should not be giving the delegation away.
Sorry, Councillor Baldock, just so I understand, I got a bit confused. I got the bit about we shouldn't be giving the delegation away, and then you said what Councillor Bonnie's proposed is a good start. That is, you seem to be suggesting still giving a delegation to an officer, or are you just suggesting that we take the delegation away and this committee will be, that this committee recommends to full council that any decisions come back to this committee?
Yeah, although it may be the decision of this committee to find an alternative way of working that in the future. That's why I said this was stage one.
Right. So your premise is that the full
The
council
delegation is
asked
removed.
not to delegate to an officer, but to delegate to a committee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonnie.
Sorry, I think if I amend my original proposal, that it's the delegation is that it comes back to Policy and Resources Committee.
Yeah, so that's what you proposed.
Yeah, well, I did it in a roundabout way, but yeah, that makes it clearer. That's easier for everyone to understand.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Worcester.
Chair, whoever's making this decision, please leave our Sheerness sites alone. Whether you're taking sites away in whatever area, the Westminster site is especially, however remote possibility, we want that area to be a go-to site rather than a no-go area. So I know it's not particularly speaking to the amendment, but please leave our sites
Therefore,
alone.
I'll cut you off. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. We are in a position where delegating to officers, when we are looked at, we're not talking about deleting or adding sites in willy-nilly. We're talking about deleting or adding in sites where the planning committee's made a decision to grant planning consent. It's extant permissions. It's about dotting I's and crossing T's and putting full stops in the right places. It's not about the big stuff. We have spent 8 years doing all the big stuff. The big stuff's done. It's now just making sure that when planning committee makes a decision about something that may be in this plan, but the developer's fed up with waiting for the plan to go through and therefore put a planning application in, when the decision's made, we actually adjust the plan to make it work. We make sure that the spelling's right. And, we could do it without having any consultation with any member. Because actually, at this point, I think the officers know full well exactly what we want and how we want it. I think the safeguards are already in there. There is no need to keep bringing it back unless we just want to delay the process. That's all that will achieve at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
No, thank you. I was actually going to ask a point of clarification, which Councillor Martin has helped me with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I disagree with what Councillor Martin's interpretation is. It says to recommend full council, blah, 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 in consultation, blah. Any required updates to and or deletions of sites with extant planning permissions. So we've already got the planning permission. It's what they're trying to change afterwards. Now, that may not be... So it could be something like the developer comes forward and says, oh, I want to get rid of... I want to add another 40 houses, or I want to remove the left hand of this site. That is something we should be involved with as councillors. As councillors, we sit on the planning committee and gave it permission, or we got overruled somewhere else, or it was under the new rules just waved through. But if something with extant planning permission wants to update it or delete things, that should come through this committee, or it should come through the members. We've given that position. We're the ones responsible. Updates or deletions, there should be some members saying this. And I say this because we've had a horrendous application in Borden where they were supposed to deliver a school after 170 sites. KCC are absolutely inept, as usual. We're now looking at they're now asking for permission to deliver, I think, 75% of the sites. We wanted to talk about that as members, and we weren't allowed. We couldn't call it in. We were told, there's nothing in the Constitution to allow it. I said, there's nothing in the Constitution to stop it, but we weren't allowed to discuss it. That's what happens when these things get delegated. We lose the ability to challenge really serious things. And if we can't challenge serious things, we're not doing our jobs as councillors. Now, I agree, we might not want to look at everything, but sometimes you've got to look at I've got to be careful what I say, I'm live. You've got to look at the bits that you don't want to look at in order to see the bits that you do. That's where we've got to be careful. What that lesson in Borden has taught me a huge lesson. Do not give things away that could be important and you can't call back to the members. That's why I think this is important.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering if there's a compromise option here which would leave the wording as currently proposed, but we add in a provision that the chair of PTPWG has the authority to bring specific items back to P&R where he considers that member oversight is required. And I'd be happy to propose that if anyone's happy to second it.
Well, I'd be happy to second if he changed it to ward member, because they're the ones who are going to know how they're going to be affected. If the ward members were able to say about the Borden thing, yeah, we want that checked, that and brought back to potentially brought back to committee, it's the ward members who know how things are going to be affected.
Thank you. So I think there's two distinct processes, and I think disagreeing about how the scheme of delegation works for planning committee is distinct from what we're talking about here, because as Councillor Martin indicated, the exercise about the extent planning permissions is looking at what has been consented either through planning commission or under delegation. Whether you feel that it should or shouldn't be decided under delegation, it's followed the correct scheme. So anything that is being amended under that recommendation 2 has been through its own correct decision-making process in terms of the constitution that is in force.
Okay. Councillor Bonney?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. Is we're in an unusual situation with LGR, but also with substantial changes possibly to how planning decisions are made and who makes those decisions. So we could be in the face of where a substantial item here could have been delegated. So it wouldn't have been through a public planning process. Now, the time frame for this isn't, we don't know how long it's going to be. We're kind of assuming, I think members are assuming this could be 2 or 3 months, but it could be much longer than that. You know, we've talked about local plan cycles, and there's been moaning and griping that we haven't done one for a long period of time. Arguably, we've saved ourselves because actually they have to be reviewed every 5 years. So even if we'd done one, we'd still be at the point of we'd be back here. But with so much flux and change, effectively you're delegating this to an unknown, and an unknown in the future where we could be in a different authority with that delegation and a whole load of people who don't particularly know the area. And that what I'm asking is that this comes back to a publicly facing committee to understand exactly what's going on, to be accountable.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, if I may. We have an amendment already on the table that's been proposed and seconded. With respect to Councillor Speed, he's also put a possible second one, which the seconder of the first one has also now seconded. Can we deal with the first amendment that's been tabled, and then we can move on?
We can first, but I'm just going to bring the Chief Exec in. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, and I've just sought advice. I think there is, and I misunderstood, but I think there is a misunderstanding. This isn't giving officers permission to take or add. What this is saying is, if already given planning permissions fall away or something changes, it gives the officer the delegation to reproduce the numbers with what the actual is. They don't say, oh yeah, actually, you want to add 5 more houses, crack on. It's not that. It's if something happens, it is a reporting tool. Of course, with any delegations, they are given by full council. They can be taken away. But fundamentally, what that will require then is that we will keep coming back to P&R and we will say, the number was 2,000. We've had 3 additional planning permissions that have changed. The number is 2002 now. Are you happy? And it will always go at the end of the agenda and everyone's going to go, yeah, or something. So what I'm saying is, I think what it's sounding like and what it is are not exactly the same thing. This is not giving officers. There is something around a school that is a different delegation. What this is it's a delegation that when things change, officers keep stuff up to date. I'm just going to confirm with Joanne that is the correct. Yeah, I just wanted members to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly then, Councillor Bonney.
I fully understand that, but the officer is only talking to the chair of PTWG, and it's down to him or her as to how much they divulge with the working group. And I just don't think, I think holding that information close and tight. And don't forget here that we have 2 really significant sites with resolution to grant. Now, if we fall out of bed on section 106, that is a significant issue.
Thank you. So, just so we've been around in circles so many times, I've got clarity. The amendment was to have all the decisions brought back to this committee and no delegation. And Councillor Speed, you suggested an amendment to that amendment, which we'll come on to. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And your amendment was? Sorry, you asked for an amendment to the amendment.
Mine was not an amendment to Councillor.
Sorry, 1 second.
Bonnie's.
It's the proposer of an amendment may alter the amendment, which is an alteration to an amendment, should they think that would assist with with the amendment in the room. So it's not an amendment of amendment; it's an alteration to the existing amendment. Does the proposer and seconder want to accept the proposed alteration to the amendment?
Can we hear it again? Bearing in mind my ask.
Well, this was not an amendment to Councillor Bonnie's amendment. I mean, that should be voted on first. And if that is voted down, then I would suggest my amendment.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so members, are those in favour of Councillor Bonnie's amendment? Those against? That amendment is lost. Councillor Speed, over to you then.
Councillor Baldock suggested I amend that to ward members. I can't quite see in practical terms how that would work. That would start getting very complicated if lots of different ward members had to be consulted. So my amendment was that the wording is as proposed, but that the chair of PTPWG has the authority to bring specific items back to P&R where he considers that member oversight is required.
So in that case, it wouldn't be in consultation with, it would be in agreement with, in which case, if there was not an agreement, the delegation would fail to be able to be exercised, and therefore it'd have to go somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay, so that's seconded by Councillor Bowen. Yeah, Councillor Gibson.
My personal view of leadership is taking slightly more blame than you are due and less credit than you are due. I think this risks putting quite a lot more blame near me, and offers me almost no opportunity at any credit, however little I might deserve. So if it is the will of the committee, I will do it, but be assured that I will be delegating hard and repeatedly to this committee, and we will be meeting a lot if that is your will, because I am first and foremost a Democrat, and that is what I would choose to do. But I don't think I will support this amendment, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Wise, please.
Yeah, I can't support that because that is giving a lot of executive power to one individual, and members decided they didn't want that to happen. They wanted a committee system. So we can delegate to officers within the confines of what we give them the delegations within and to take those decisions within. But I'm not comfortable with doing that. That seems to me that we are deciding on the hoof to grant random bits of executive power to members that sits outside the committee system, and we're basically then rewriting the constitution as we go along as well. And believe me, there's a working group for that.
Yeah, and don't I know it? Thank you. Okay, so we've got an amendment on the floor. Sorry, Councillor Bollock.
Yeah, I do think that puts Councillor Gibson in a somewhat invidious position. I'm still going to vote for it. No, the reason I wanted it to be the ward member, most of these, if you talk to the ward member, they're going to go, yeah, that's fine. If it's something that the ward member thinks is a serious issue, and the chair of PTPWG is not going to know the ins and outs of every ward across the borough, the ward member or ward members, maximum 3, so it's not that hard. It just means that if it's going to have an impact on the local area, if they think it's serious enough, there is an ability for the ward members to actually come back and say, yeah, on this one, I think a councillor needs to reconsider it. A democratic body needs to consider this. I can't imagine it would be used very often, but it would at least give us the opportunity when if something serious crops up, to bring it back and have a democratic vote. So I can't support this amendment, but I will be having another go in a minute.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Thanks, Chair. I won't be supporting the amendment. I've got less of a problem with recommend 2 than I have with recommend 4. I think recommend 4 is a far more invidious one. So I have no problem at all with 2, but if you'll accept it, I'd like to make an amendment later on number 4, please.
My goodness. Right. Councillor Speed.
I take Councillor Baldock's point. I'd like to propose a further amendment to my amendment, which adds in consultation with the relevant ward members where appropriate. So the chair of PTPWG has the authority to bring specific items back to PNR in consultation with the relevant ward members where necessary or where appropriate, where he considers that member oversight is required. So that's an alteration to my amendment.
Councillor Bowen. Councillor Bowen.
I thought that the place for the ward members to make comments about a planning permission was at planning committee, and that we're talking about democratic oversight. And I thought the point of this recommendation is for things that have been through planning committee or been through the planning officer process and delegation that have come through whilst the plan is being digested or produced, can then be incorporated into the plan without having to, go too far, go anywhere else. The democratic oversight and the consultation of members has already taken place by the time that these matters are being considered for this recommendation. So I don't think this adds anything. I think that process has already been undertaken, and is now just from the democratic oversight point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm hoping that this really does put it to bed to an extent. My understanding is that if we stick with as it is, rather than accepting any of the amendments, if we had an allocation in the local plan for, say, 50 houses on one particular plot, and maybe it's got reserved matters permission for 45, we just reduce the number by 5. Or maybe it goes to planning committee and it gets permission for 75 flats, and therefore we increase the number by that 20 odd. That's what it's for. That's it. There's nothing else. That's it. So we don't need any of the amendments, and I hope that we can go to the vote on the substantive in a minute rather than have to.
Yeah, so do I. Right, Councillor Speed. Then, do you want to just so we can get it recorded, your amendment with the added amendment, the alteration? Sorry, yes.
So the wording is as proposed, but the chair of PTPWG has the authority to bring specific items back to P&R, having consulted with the relevant ward members where appropriate, and where he considers that that matter requires member oversight.
Okay, members, those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Some members, yeah. Some members, that one is lost. We're back to the substantive motion now then. Councillor Whiting.
Thanks, Chair. As I said just now, I think that actually recommend 4 is a slightly more invidious one, but possibly a more simple one to solve, because this effectively gives the officers delegation to update or delete development management, strategic or allocation policies. And I think that's quite a heavy delegation. I think if the air quality modelling and all the other transport stuff comes back, and the officers believe that we do need to make some amendments or deletions to any of those policies, which are important policies and sit at the heart of the local plan, then a single paper coming back to a single extraordinary meeting would be adequate for members to have oversight of the proposed changes, because I think that is a very far-reaching power and delegation we're giving. I know it says deletions to policies, so it suggests that it's taking words out here and there, but words, as the lawyers that work for developers know, can mean 100 different things. So I think it's quite important that perhaps that we amend 4 to suggest that we don't delegate that, but we ask officers to bring back their recommendations for any changes following the transport and air quality modelling, the sustainability appraisal and habitat, all that other things are complete, that if there are changes to be made, they come back as a single paper to this committee. And I think that could be dealt with quite quickly. It's not a big it wouldn't be a hugely onerous piece of work, I don't believe. They'd have to prepare all of those documents to record their own decision anyway, because it's a decision we're delegating, so it would need to be recorded as such. And that's what I would propose that we ask the officers.
Okay, I'm just going to bring Natalie back in.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, you are correct, Councillor Whiting. It is deletions to bits of the policies rather than the policies. I mean, that recommendation is more of a sort of insurance, so that if we do need it, we have it. It is more things, so it would be bits within the policy, so potentially things like the habitats assessment or the transport might come back that we need to add some more planting in, some more sustainable drainage systems, that sort of things. So it is the details. It wouldn't be anything potentially that would be major. Obviously, the delegation would be with, at the minute, with the chair and with the head of planning. So it isn't to delete whole policies. And in terms of, obviously, at PTPWG, there is the workshop coming up on the transport. So those elements would be discussed at that workshop with the transport modellers. So a lot of those details would be discussed at that. So you would be, as a wider committee, aware of those sort of things coming forward. So, as I said, it's more that we've put it in as a sort of insurance in case we do need it, but we don't see that it would be any major things. It would be sort of tweaks to policies, as I said, in terms of if there's any bits to the design we need moving, any sort of landscape elements, and that sort of thing, access points. Thank you.
So thanks for that. Thanks, Chair. Well,
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
quite happy
can I ask whether we can extend standing orders?
The chair's aware.
Thanks, Chair. I could happily amend change my amendment so that it requires minor updates or minor deletions, because once we get past the minor stage, I do think, and what Natalie has suggested are all minor things. So I'd like to see that written in the delegation, so that we are all aware that if these are minor things, then we allow it. And if we don't, it needs to come back. Thank you, Chair.
Right, members, thank you. Members, with your indulgence, can I extend the time for the meeting? It's 5 to 10. Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
I understand what Councillor Whiting is saying, but then we have the whole issue of what is minor. And we have had some extensive disagreements over what a minor amendments are. Huge, massive changes are minor sometimes. So I would prefer he keep to his original amendment, because I think it's right that we have the ability to change, to oversee and have a final word on changes, policy changes. It's actually gone from my screen now, the exact wording, but it did give me concern, and I just think that we ought to have the ability to oversee what's happening. Deletions to policies, we sit there arguing and doing all the work on these policies. If you want updates and deletions, that's something we should at least have oversight on. So I hear what Natalie said, but all this is doing is asking us to have a chance to have a look and express our opinion.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the proposal...
It hasn't. You've got to ask if it's
no
been
debate.
seconded.
It's not been seconded.
Yeah, it hasn't been seconded. So, do we have a seconder for Councillor Whiting's proposal? Yeah. Okay. That was your original proposal.
Yeah, I'll stick with the original one. And to be honest, if it's coming back to the working group, then it's a list of those. The delegation is limited to bringing those suggested amendments back to the working group to make for it to have oversight, not just the chairman of the working group, but for the working group in the way that Natalie suggested would be. I'd be happy with that.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Baldock. Those in favour? Sorry.
You have the wording clear of exactly what this amendment is, so I'm not clear.
Step in, Mike. Page 259, you want?
Effectively, Chairman, it's to ask the officers if the officers feel the need to make amendments or deletions to the policies that are listed under 4, that they are brought back in a report to the policy working group.
Okay. Right. Those. Oh, sorry.
Me again. If you delegate, my understanding what you're saying is you're delegating to the officer in consultation with the working group. It is still a delegation. The officer can disagree with the working group and make the decision, which is in consultation with. So it is more, I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. It is still, now, officers rarely go against the people that they're consulting with. However, it is their delegation, you're still giving them the decision. And I just need members, it has been said to me that about something else that members didn't know what they were voting for. I just need to be really clear. If you vote for this amendment, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but if you do, you are still voting for the decision maker to be the officer, but in consultation with the PTPWG. Would that, and that would then, we'd need to be clear what that consultation looks like, because that could just be an email to consult. It doesn't necessarily have to be at a meeting or in public. It is consulting with the members of PTPWG. So I just wanted to be aware, I just wanted to be very clear that you're all aware that that's what you're voting for. And if you have concerns about the officer having the delegation, then remove the delegation from the officer. Don't give it to the officer and then be concerned when they've done something that is not what you would have done.
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just that I had some questions around that I just wanted to clarify. So I was under the impression until just then that it was going to be that a paper comes to an extraordinary meeting of this committee, but you said the policy working group. So just a clarification on that, please. And secondly, just a question about if it is to an extraordinary meeting of this committee rather than in consultation with the policy working group, what would that mean for the timeline and the implications for that? That's what I just want to understand before there's any more amendments or votes on all of this, please. Because obviously there has to be notice go out for a meeting, paper published, blah, blah. I just want to know that. And if that is the concern is about member oversight, in the interests of time pressures, if it was to do that, is there any role that it could be that goes to the Urgent Decisions Committee, if that's the concern? That's just my questions around this, so that I can understand a way forward, because I actually do understand the reason for this. So I'm just, I'm curious to have some clarification on those, please.
Thank you. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wise. One of my common refrains is that we do not have a lot of wiggle room in this time frame. We are having to work at pace. We are targeting full council next week on the 22nd with a go live date for the consultation on the 10th of August. My message before has been even a delay of 1 or 2 weeks will really jeopardise that timescale. And I have to repeat that here. If we are to come back to a formal meeting of committee, it blows the timescale. Thank you.
Just to clarify, if I may, Chair, for Councillor Wise, that's why, in a sense, I changed my amendment, because for exactly the reasons that Joe has just pointed out, that we have got an enormous time constraint. If there is already a plan to bring any of these changes back to PTWG, and I'm getting a nod there isn't, but it will be easier to convene a meeting of that group to give some member oversight to the proposed changes subsequent to these other things. That's all. So, but in answer to your question, my amendment now suggests that those suggested changes and amendments, deletions, whatever they are, come back to the PTGB, and the decision is taken in consultation with the wider group members, not just the chairman.
Chair, a point of order. What would happen if we just scrapped recommendation 4?
It wouldn't be an evidence-led local plan, and as you know, I've sort of banged on about that ad nauseum. You know, the plan that we submit at Christmas has to be evidence-led, so we do have to, the evidence that we get back from those 3 or 4 bits listed there need to be reflected in the local plan.
Yeah, but without 4, it would be left to full council to have to do it, wouldn't it? Because full council's responsible, it just gives you the delegation. So if we scrapped 4, well, that'd be worse, wouldn't it? Yeah, we'll stick with PTPW.
Okay, so Councillor Whiting, then, just for one final level of clarity, so everybody's aware what they're voting on, your amendment, please. 259.
It's to recommend that full council delegate to the head of planning in consultation with the PTPWG any requirements. We're just removing the word chair out of recommendation 4.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. So, members, we'll take that one to the vote then. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? 2. So that's carried. So the amendment is carried. Good. Right, so can we now go back to the substantive item then as amended? Right, agree. So, Councillor Gibson, you wanted to propose that?
Very much want to.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting seconded it. All those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? No. oh, yes, you can. Yeah, you can. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, members, and thank you, planning team, for your extensive input this evening. And thank you for all your work on everything that you've done to get us this far. Thank you. Oh, right, okay. Yes, because it's item 13, yes. Councillor Martin and Councillor Bonney, you may choose to leave now.
But you are welcome to come back for item 13.
Oh yeah, I'll be back for 13.
Yeah. Right, members, the next item on the agenda is the winding up of Swirl Rainbow Homes Limited. And Charlotte sat at the end there.
So I'll introduce the report very briefly. Well, I sort of have. I've just been in another room. So as members were aware, the Cabinet back in October 2020 agreed to establish a local housing company to deliver the council's ambitions to deliver affordable housing. That was based on a business case presented at the time. Obviously, a lot has happened since then. COVID, Brexit, various other things that have significantly changed the development market. On that basis, a revised model was produced to look at the projects for delivering affordable housing completed by our Section 151 officer. This identified quite a significant viability gap, and therefore grant funding was required to enable us to take forward the project. The Housing, Health and Communities Committee has been overseeing this project and obviously consulted throughout this process, as has the shareholder panel for Swell Rainbow Homes. It was agreed by them previously that we would look to access Homes England funding, but we would need to do that as a council rather than the company. That funding has been successful and we have enabled ourselves to let a contract and has actually started on site. We've now reviewed sort of the future delivery model as we also need to be a registered provider, and therefore it still makes sense for the council to be the primary delivery vehicle for this project and the work going forward. This therefore makes the company surplus to requirements as laid out in the report. So the report is suggesting the winding up of Swell Rainbows Homes. Just to clarify that the project will continue and being delivered under the umbrella of the council. So the objectives of the work is still taking place. So recommendations are to approve the winding up of Swell Rainbow Homes Limited and delegate to the Head of Housing and Communities in consultation with the Head of Mid-Kent Legal Services take all necessary steps to effect the winding up of the company. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to propose this. Really, I just see it as an administrative action.
You have an excellent sight, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Baldock?
Seconded.
Members, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and sorry you've had to wait so long, Charlotte. Right, members, the next item is the financial losses linked to Levelling Up Fund displacement. There is an appendix on blue paper. Okay, we'll get them supplied. Members, do you just want a few minutes to read that? If you just signal when you've read it, and we can proceed. Right, okay. So I'll hand over to Joanne then, please, to give a brief.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, members. So this report sets out the financial losses incurred by the charity Sheppey Matters due to their temporary displacement during the Levelling Up Fund improvement works at Beachfields in Sheerness. I won't mention the exempt report in my introduction. Sheppey Matters, along with the other tenants of the Healthy Living Centre, decanted the building and relocated to alternative temporary locations in January 2025 to enable the building works to commence. I am sure you all know this, but just a word on Sheppey Matters. They are a health and wellbeing charity which delivers a range of community-focused programmes across the island and has been based at the centre for over 20 years now, since 2003. So since decanting the building, they've been operating from a combination of bases across the Sheppey Gateway, a rented unit on Sheerness High Street, and their existing outreach hubs in Eastchurch and other venues. And the cost of this temporary accommodation has been a legitimate cost to the Levelling Up Fund budget. Prior to the requirement for all tenants to surrender their leases so that they could decant the building and pave the way for new leases to reflect revised and extended footprints, Minster Medical Practice was a subtenant of Sheppey Matters. Sheppey Matters' lease with us as the Borough Council specifically allowed them a subtenancy for GP purposes only. Prior to and following the surrender of the leases, it was agreed that direct tenancies in the future, so the GP and Sheppey Matters both being separate tenants of Swell Borough Council, would be clearer and less onerous. So that was the basis on what we were proceeding. The loss of income from the GP tenancy during displacement has also been a legitimate cost to the LUF budget, and Sheppey Matters has been and is being reimbursed from programme funds. Accordingly, loss of income from casual hire or rent arrangements not specifically permitted under lease terms is not eligible expenditure, so that cannot be reimbursed from LUF. And as such, Sheppey Matters has lost income from regular casual hire to the venue, to the value shown in the exempt appendix. You will know that during the course of the building works, Minster Medical Practice announced its intention not to return to the Healthy Living Centre. There is a whole consultation process going on around that. We know the ICB has confirmed that if Minster Medical Practice proceed to submit a premises closure application, they will work with us, the Health and Care Partnership and other stakeholders to ensure there will be a primary care, a health-based use of that footprint. But following all of these considerations, myself, Emma, Larissa met with Sheppey Matters officers and trustees back in May to talk about the impact of the displacement on them beyond that which has and can be compensated for by the LUF budget, and their concerns about the uncertain timescale relating to the return of GP provision. So on that basis, there are 4 recommendations before you tonight. That members agree to underwrite from reserves the loss of rental income to Sheppey Matters from any delay in the return of GP provision to the Healthy Living Centre for the remainder of the financial year following the ability to reoccupy. At this point in time, we suspect that will be the 31st of October. We're confident up until that point, LUF can continue to fund that rental income, but this is talking about the period after. Recommendation 2 is that members agree in principle that future rental income from the provision of health services within the Healthy Living Centre, equivalent to the 2025 rental sum, be passported to Sheppey Matters to reflect the terms of their original lease, and that this sum be revised in future alongside rent reviews for the Sheppey Matters and GP or health tenancies, and in accordance with any such changes. Third, that members agree to consider underwriting any loss of income from any delay in the return of GP provision to the Healthy Living Centre, which persists into the new financial year as part of the 27-28 budget setting process. And finally, that members agree to use reserves to fund the loss of income experienced by Sheppey Matters from regular casual hire arrangements during the displacement period, figure as set out in the appendix income. Happy to answer any questions as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's two separate bits to this. One is the Sheppey Matters and their loss of income from their own activities, let's say, casual hiring. And as far as I can read it, and as Joan has just said, that there was provision within LUF to shell out. But there was also, and she said it right more or less at the start, we agreed that there'd be separate leases in the future for the GP practice and Sheppey Matters, which was quite contrary to the view of members at the time that we were putting in the LUF bid. I know it because I was the member and I made sure that my colleagues agreed that it's as is. But anyway, you decided there would be separate leases. So how on earth can we now owe should we be reimbursing Sheppey Matters for the loss of income from a GP practice who was never going to be paying them anyway because they were going to be paying SBC direct? So I've got seems a bit of a dichotomy there. You can't have your cake and eat it. Either they are paying us and we're saying, oh, but you can have them. And I know there's this bit now about the passporting, but that wasn't there originally. And it is entirely possible that had we not intervened in the arrangement as was and said, no, you'll be paying us, your contract is with us, your lease is with SBC, not to a charity, it is entirely possible we may not be in this position anyway. But, you could say hindsight is a great thing, but as I say, I told you at the time. So I do have a few problems here. Let's say I get the bit about you've lost income because you've moved, but there's provision within the bid, whatever it was. But I think reimbursing them for the loss of income from the GP surgery that we're going to be paying SBC anyway, it's a bit misty there. I think I want it in words of one syllable. I'm not talking figures either, which is what the blue paper is. The figures are irrelevant.
Thank you.
It's the principle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Happy to try and clarify. If we treat the finances and the lease separately, it was never the intention to financially disadvantage Sheppey Matters by taking on that lease arrangement directly. We acknowledge and respect that their original lease allowed for that subtenancy and specifically allowed for them to keep the income from that. When starting a lease arrangement from scratch, the advice we have from property and legal colleagues is if you have 2 tenants in the building, treat them as 2 tenancies. And that takes away the burden of Sheppey Matters being a head tenant. So it was felt neater and cleaner to do the 2 tenancies that way with 2 separate leases. But that's why we're bringing you the recommendation about using that financial income or passporting that financial income back to Sheppey Matters, because it was never the intention in separating the leases to financially disadvantage them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm going to start with a question, if I may, and then I'll come back after that. Because it's on this question under 2.6 on page 728. Sorry, on about the lease. I'm trying to find the page with the lease on it. Because I spoke to Sheppey Matters about the lease arrangements, and if I can just quickly read their response, it says there was no sublease in place with the surgery. The initial arrangement, this is 23 years ago, with the then trust and Dr. Murty was that it was more of a payment than a rental, and when the new surgery, Minster, took over the possibility of a sublease, that was discussed, but nothing was put in place. Now, the paper is saying there was a sublease. They are saying there never was a sublease, and while it was discussed, it was never put. So I'd just like that question clarified because I'm confused by it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Thank you, Chair. I think that is one of the reasons that we recommend it's neater and cleaner to separate the tenancies. The lease made provision for there to be a sublease. The arrangements weren't necessarily always in place specifically in writing. They were in arrangement. They were there in practice rather than in writing. And if we directly control both leases, then we are in control of making sure that everything is as it should be.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm grateful for that. The logic of what's being proposed makes sense to me. It's simply the accuracy of the report. Because my understanding is there was no sublease ever signed, and I just wanted to be clear on that. But the answer I've got back suggests that what I'm being told by Sheppey Matters is probably correct. But my more substantive point, really, Chair, is that if we are going to go down this route, and we've suggested it in one of the recommendations, that we actually make good any repayments that we can't claim back from the LUF funding that we take out of reserves for future. If we are going to reimburse the Sheppey Matters for the money they would have had from the medical centre if the medical centre chooses not to relocate during the period while the NHS more generally is looking for another tenant, looking for another GP to take over, that if we do that we take that from reserves as well, because we've learned all tonight in our briefings and various discussions how tight we are on revenue funding for the next couple of years. We do have some money in reserves. I wouldn't want to see pressure put on other revenue spending to fund this. I would rather, if we do this, that all of the monies that we can't claim back are taken out of reserves, both for the remainder of this year and for next year, if that's where we come to it. Because I don't think we should be taking money out of other council priorities on a revenue basis to do this. But I see the case for helping them out best we can. And it's in our interest, of course, then, to ensure that we work as hard as we can with the NHS to find a new tenant as quickly as possible, so that we are not met with a bill for reimbursing a loss of income. So my sort of semi-proposal would be that if we do this, that we do it from reserves and not from revenue funding. Thank you.
Okay, members, I just need your indulgence to extend time again. Thank you very much. And now I'm on to Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't want to let this item pass without highlighting the extremely hard work of our officers. This hasn't been a straightforward situation. There's been some twists and turns. And I think that it's very seldom highlighted that underneath the lovely facades that we're putting on these buildings, there is lots of contractual work going on behind the scenes. There's lots of negotiation. There's lots of networking that needs to happen. And I'd also like to extend my thanks to Nigel, who was the previous CEO of Sheppey Matters, Rebecca, who is now the current CEO of Sheppey Matters, and their board of trustees, because it's sometimes easy to skate over the fact that a large relocation that has happened to Sheppey Matters would have sunk some charities. It would have easily have meant that services would have stalled. It would have meant that residents would have been affected, and Sheppey Matters does help lots of very vulnerable residents. Their support of Sheppey community during COVID around isolation and loneliness is only one of the examples that really underlines how much this charity is needed. And again, that is hats off to officers that you have managed to work around all of the hiccups that this has put in front of you, with the GP surgery, with the relocation, and to come out the other side with this relationship intact is really what we should have been striving for. And I believe that there is a future of partnership between Sheppey Matters and SWAL, which is the best thing for everybody concerned. I absolutely support these recommendations, and I think that when we're looking at, it's always easy to go back and go, with hindsight, we would have done this or that or the other. We were very lucky to be given that LOVE funding, and anything that's happened with regards to the leasing would have come up eventually, because all I can see has happened with regarding sorting out this relationship is that we have righted potentially our contractual leasing obligations with how we're going to go forward with that building. But it is nice to see that this work is coming forward to make sure it doesn't overly detrimentally affect that charity, because we absolutely need them, Chair. So I think this piece of work is excellent, and well done for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously very important. Important enough for senior members of staff to go along for a meeting. A lot of questions and clarification sought tonight. I just find it amazing that a meeting that involves 3 senior members of staff for something that's going to come to a committee, there was nobody, no councillor there, or maybe there was, I don't know. There was no opportunity for member oversight. There's no opportunity for members to raise questions. People have asked some really pertinent questions tonight. Some that I think we probably would rather not in public. I'm just surprised that member involvement is last minute and effectively once the decisions have been made. But anyway.
We were asked by the committee to meet with them. We did. I'm not aware of any decisions that's been made. Once we've met with the committee and understood their situation, we wrote a report. We brought it here for decision.
So which committee asked you?
Not committee. Once we've been to see them, the chief executive of Sheppey Matters, once we had got the facts, we wrote it into a report, we brought it here. There hasn't been a decision made.
No, but we have the recommendations. I was referring to the decision we're about to make. I just would have thought that there would be a chair of a relevant committee, or at least some member involvement before it got to this, because this is us underwriting another organisation. There are questions about the nature of sublease or lease. There are questions about future revenue, which we're committing to, and this is the first member comment. I just find that a little surprising, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
So in previous times, Councillor, we would have had a conversation with the Cabinet member, and it would have gone to Cabinet. Our system is that no one councillor has primacy over anyone else. So the way the committee system works is officers do the research, write the report and bring it to committee. There would be a question of who we would have asked. Would we have asked all the ward councillors that deal with Sheppey Matters areas? Would we have asked the leader as the leader, but he's not an executive leader? I suppose if there is one downside of the committee system, it is that there isn't the ability to have one person doing things, because decisions need to be made collectively by a committee and scrutinised by a committee. But you're correct, in the olden days it would have been whoever the cabinet member was, but unfortunately the chair of no chair of a committee has that same ability to do that. Thank you.
So can I clarify, could we decide not to make a decision tonight and get further information? We can do that, right? Obviously we could vote not to do it, but obviously I don't think any of us want to do that. If there was further information that members wanted, we would have to vote to get that information, and then you would go and get it.
So members can decide to defer the matter. If members wish us to seek more information, we would need to know what information members wish us to seek. But yes, that members can defer the decision if they choose.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know what my colleague in front is getting at, but he certainly wasn't at the budget briefing at 6 o'clock. I was. And when we're saying, for example, you could knock that line out 60 grand. 60 grand is 60 grand saving. I'm not going to say what the line was because I have people up in arms. And that's the sort of thing, you know, we have got to start getting a bit responsible about our finances. You cannot keep taking stuff from the reserves. There is no money tree out the garden. And talking about underwriting another organisation, not just for the period, but, you know, could be into next year and the rest of it. Yeah, we're having star chambers, budget briefings, all the rest of it. I mean, we've got to start being a bit more responsible. I am not happy tonight to sit here and stick my hand up and underwrite this organisation. So, you know, forget the amounts, because we'll be have to go into private session. The amounts are irrelevant. It is the principle. I didn't say I wasn't coming into your space anymore. It was somebody else. So take it up with them. You know, well, I was expecting this money off of you. Give us it. You can't expect. Swell's not running a charity. Every halfpenny we're supposed to be accounting for. There's things we would like to do as members that we can't because the money isn't there. And the pitiful amounts that's left in reserves we're using to fund the budget gap, you know, in spite of the 151 officer shouting at us. But we do need to start looking at this money seriously. And, oh yeah, let's underwrite them. You know, aren't we lovely? No, we're not. I've got a problem with that. I'm happy to defer for further information if other people want that. But otherwise, I'm happy to stick my hand up and say on most of these 4 recommendations, at least 3, I'm going to say no. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I take a somewhat different view at this point in time. Having read all the documentation, yeah, you could argue that they didn't have a written down sublease with their previous subtenant. But that doesn't mean that a contract doesn't exist. Okay, you could argue that a verbal contract is only worth the paper it is written on, but it still existed. Yeah, it's that late in the evening. But no, it is, in all honesty, there has been a principle and practice. They had a gentleman's agreement, say, or a lady's agreement, however you want to word it. Rent was exchanged and people stayed there. That is a lease. Just because the terms weren't written down. So, yes, that was in play. We have asked for the organisation to vacate the premises that they were leasing from us for a period of time so that we could undertake works. As a result of those works, costs have been incurred. We're not saying that forever and ever we would underwrite. We are saying that, okay, the subtenant that you had a verbal contract with has indicated they may not come back. We would be willing, whilst we are working to bring those services back through another provider, to cover 1 year. And beyond that, we're saying, well, the rent that you were getting, you can have back, but anything over the top of that, we're going to keep. It's not a huge giveaway. This is a being fair to an organisation that has worked in close partnership with us for many years to deliver many services for the benefit primarily of residents in Sheppey. And I could quite easily, as a member from Faversham, goes, you know what, no, I want the money kept in the account. But actually, I think it is the right thing to do to go ahead with these 4 recommendations that are of limited financial implication at this time. The situation would need to be reviewed further down the road. And actually, this only commits us for 1 financial year.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. This is a bit of a legacy problem that Swale inherited, that certainly property has had to grapple with, where Swale hasn't been fully in control of its buildings. It's not taken a robust approach to enforcing its lease terms. It's allowed subletting without doing it properly. And whilst you might say there's a verbal contract, there is a written agreement with the main tenant here. And I have to say, I'm trying not to skirt into the blue paper, but I feel I'm going to have to. And if the officer thinks the answers skirt into the blue paper, then we're going to have to go into the blue paper, quite frankly, because what's presented is not my understanding of what we were supposed to be doing. I'll ask the questions, you can think about the response, and then we'll have to see whether we adjourn. Is there currently a lease contract in place with Sheppey Matters? Has that been extinguished?
Yes, that had to be extinguished for them to decant the building. Otherwise, they would have had rights over the space that was being worked on. That's correct.
So that makes life a lot easier. What I'm concerned about is we have decanted and they have agreed to this. Now, had they agreed to this, then one of their terms should have been, we've lost a load of income, or we will do, therefore we want to be compensated. Now, if they fail to do that, that is them. When they agreed to give up their lease, they needed to have done that. This is all part of a transaction. We're working with some moving parts here. We need to be fully in control of our building, and we need to be fully in control of the leases. And I do agree, we need separate ones. So we now have effectively a vacant building that's being redeveloped. I'm loathed that we start giving back money from this scheme that we hadn't budgeted for. That was not the agreement, wasn't my understanding. And it's to be 2 separate leases. Now, we've got a problem with the ICB, but that's for us to sort out in the background. Sheppey Matters is going to be getting shiny new space to its spec with the new lease terms agreed. So we can't forget that we've put an awful lot of money and effort into this space. Now, I'm not really very happy with what the proposals are here. It wasn't my understanding of how this was to work. This was to be a clean break, and that the 2 entities were to have their independent leases that we could oversee as landlord. And we have to get with it. And we've, as a council, clawed our way back on our own real estate over the last 4 years to right some of the wrongs of the past, to make sure we've got that control. You know, if we give them the money to the point we meet practical completion as a gesture of goodwill, I could live with that. But when it goes beyond that, that's not, I think that's a step too far. Angela's right, you know, we've got some hard budget decisions to make here. We don't have an obligation here. We have an obligation is to deliver the building and get those spaces ready and occupied. So I'm not very happy with the recommendations as set out.
Thank you. Councillor Boyne, please.
Thank you, Chair. My little brain, and if I've got this wrong, I'll accept that. We have an organisation that used one of our buildings. Something was wrong with that building. So we said, you can't stay here anymore. Thank you very much. You're going to have to find somewhere else to go. And off they went. Granted, they're a charity. There are lots of charities in Swale that do equally as valuable work, arguably. So off they went. And they were looking to come back, but they also wanted to come back. They want us to pay them to come back. And on the principle that we'll also cover some costs whilst we're waiting for the ICB, to decide whether they're going to come back or not, which could be next week, could be next month, it could be, dare I say, never. I mean, it's only Julian Hyde and Tenement Lindsay about health GP provision. It's an interesting one. It all sounds a bit... Really? If you were... And I know we're not a corporate organisation, but if we were a corporate organisation, there's no way we would be doing this, to my understanding. On a specific point, point 3, or recommendation 3, doesn't make sense to me, because what it's asking members to agree to think about underwriting any loss. So that's not agreeing any loss; it's to think about whether we might agree it. It's a double negative. How can we agree to consider? Yeah, I've agreed. We'll consider that. Well done. Have I got it wrong? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I think where I was coming from in writing recommendation 3 is that budget setting has to go through its November and February P&R processes, and that it would be premature to agree that now. If I've got that wrong, I suppose the ability is on the table to agree it now, looking at Lisa, but that was my thought process.
I think I might have advised you on that, because there's two problems, two issues. There's the in-year issue, which is what the reserve proposal was for, but the ongoing position could be dealt with during the budget build process. So that is why there are two kind of streams to this issue.
Thank you. And I get that. I'm still not then sure what it means. It's we could change it then to members agree to underwrite at any loss rather than agree to consider. Or we change it, members. Yeah, I think it doesn't work any other way. It's that fogginess about it. It's just not working for us. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Whiting.
I wasn't going to come back, but thank you, Chair. I think actually recommended is quite clear. And I agree with Lisa. It seems to me quite clear. If we do go with recommend 3, it is to say we will consider this as part of the normal budget process. So there's no guarantee that Sheffield Matters will get that money next year in 27-28. It's something that we've agreed to consider as we set the budget for 27-28. Whether we then decide to give them the money or not is a matter for that process to determine, and that's so. I think that's actually quite clear. As I say, I've got an awful lot of sympathy with the fact that but to some extent we bail out the other tenant there quite regularly with vast sums of money, and we do that on a regular basis. Sheffield Matters we are required to have a healthy living centre in that building as part of the original government government scheme that set the thing up, and we're required to have a GP surgery. So we're in a bit of a rock and a hard place as well if either of those organisations leave. And the ICB can't make the doctor's surgery go back. The ICB can take away the doctor's surgery contract, or the doctors can simply walk away and say, well, if that's what you want, we're not prepared to do it. And we've had other GP practices do the same thing on Sheppey and walk away. And these guys could do the same if they wanted to. So there's no guarantee the ICB can make them go back, which is something. And there's no guarantee that Sheppey Matters, if they're losing a sum of money because of all this, that they will continue in operation, and they may close their operation or move somewhere else. We don't know. Those things aren't in our gift at all. I think the thing to remember, of course, is that as Councillor Worcester pointed out, the services that are provided down there are central to the population in Sheerness and across the island, and we just need to consider very carefully. Sheppey Matters didn't want to vacate the building. They didn't. I think if they'd taken legal advice, they may not have surrendered their lease so easily. But they were asked to surrender their lease, and they did. And they were asked to vacate the building, and they did. But none of those were decisions they took lightly, and they certainly weren't their idea. So I've got some sympathy with them, certainly in year. And I think my only change, if we were to consider it for next year, would be that we do it from out the reserves and not from the revenue budget. But I've already made that point earlier. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So, members, do you feel you've got enough information, or there was a proposal about deferring it earlier?
Can we take them one by one, Chair?
We can, yeah. Councillor Worcester.
Sorry, Chair, I just have to challenge a little bit of the assumption here. When we say that we are in fact landlords, and when I signed up to be a councillor, I didn't sign up to be a slightly good employer. I didn't sign up to be a slightly good landlord. What I stood up to be was to be someone that purported exemplar responsibility to our community. And I absolutely push back against the fact that to deal with Swale Borough Council, anybody in the charity sector or voluntary sector should come with a team of lawyers, should come with a expertise in HR and PR and all of the stuff that we come with that. We've got a fantastic team of lawyers. Well done us. That's lovely. Brilliant. And I've already said in this meeting on this item how much I respect the officers' work that has gone into this. But we have to be better than this, don't we? You know, I'm not saying I think the agreement that's come forward from going forward is absolutely right, and we sorted out that grey area, absolutely. But to say that actually we moved that charity out because we wanted to, our funding come forward, that was our decision, absolutely. But I just think we have some form of social responsibility here. I wouldn't be doing myself justice. I couldn't look myself in the mirror when I got home tonight unless I said, actually, I think Swale could be the bigger person here, to be honest with you.
Councillor Bonney.
Chair, can I just point out, every time somebody speaks, I'm changing my mind. So can we just stop on a negative?
So when I discussed this fairly early on in the project, and when we were talking about tenants and occupiers, what is absolutely normal thing to do would be to ask a tenant to leave, but you have an agreement for lease in place. That is the normal process. And we're in this pickle because we don't have an agreement for lease. If we had an agreement for lease, we wouldn't have this lack of clarity around who gets what and when. And it has to be a learning curve. But it's a bit frustrating when I had that discussion. I know I had that discussion. And I think anyone with any common sense, if you're asked to leave somewhere, you say, well, I'm giving this up, but I need certainty on my future if I'm coming back. So I think we've got to take a reasonably robust approach on this, quite frankly. That's my parting words.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, members, are we happy to take this one to the vote? Okay, and should we take them one at a time? Okay, so recommendation 1, that members agree to underwrite from reserves the loss of rental income to Sheppey Matters from any delay in the return of GP provision to the Healthy Living Centre for the remainder of the financial year 26-27, following the ability to reoccupy. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? Thank you. So that's carried. Recommendation 2, that members agree in principle that future rental income from the provision of GP or related ICB services within the Healthy Living Centre, equivalent to the 2025 rental sum, be passported to Sheppey Matters, reflecting the terms of their original lease, and that this sum be revised in future alongside rent reviews for the Sheppey Matters and GP/Health tenancies and in accordance with any such changes. Are those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? So that one's carried too. Recommendation 3, that members agree to consider underwriting any loss of income from any delay in return of GP provision to the Healthy Living Centre, which persists into the new financial year as part of the 2027-28 budget setting process. Those in favour? Sorry.
Could we, just to make sure, have a comma under financial year? Sorry, comma after. I'm not one of these dot the I and cross the T, but you know, this is why I've read it 16 times and finally got it. Comma after financial year as part of the budget setting process.
I think we can agree to inserting that. Okay, members, those in favour of that one? And those against? Abstentions? So that one is carried too. Recommendation 4, that members agree to use reserves to fund the loss of income experienced by Sheppey Matters from regular casual hire arrangements during a levelling up fund of the LUF, in other words, displacement period as set out in the exempt appendix. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? So that is carried as well. Thank you, Ma'am. So all 4 recommendations are carried. Thank you for your indulgence this evening. I'm sorry it's been such a long session. Over necessity, of course. Safe flight out to Ibiza for those that are going.